Hi, welcome everyone to the Silicon Brighton NHS fundraiser. My name is Steve Rackley. I'm one of the co-founders of Silicon Brighton. I am joined today by my fellow co-founders, Matthew Quinn and Phil Lewis. Many of you will have attended one of our previous events, and for many it will be your first. But for everyone, this will be the first time that you have been with us online. Firstly, we would like to explain why it has taken almost 7 weeks to put together some sort of format for you. Many of you will know that Silicon Brighton is not our day job. We, like all of you, have seen our businesses suffer and in some cases disappear. Some of us are now out of work, furloughed, and not sure if there will be jobs for us to return to. The long and short of it is we have been in an absolute state of shock as this pandemic has taken shape and so fundamentally changed our lives. All that being said, it is at times like this that we reflect and appreciate those within our communities that have been and are currently risking their lives and in some cases losing their lives for us. We will never in our lifetimes be able to pay back anyone in the NHS or any other key services for that matter for the work they will have done for us in this time. But through our efforts, we can acknowledge it, respect it, and thank them for it. And that is why we're all here today. I have friends and family who work for the NHS. You will all have friends and family that work in the NHS. Today we show them how special they are to us. In terms of the format for the day, we will have some similarities to our in-person Silicon Brighton events. As you may have noticed, we are back in the grounds at Platform 9 in Hove. We absolutely love it here. Yeah, of course, it's much better when the room is packed, but for today, it certainly makes a nice change from our homes. We will also have the same calibre of excellent speakers sharing their knowledge and experience with us all. Now, we could be called out for not doing a live event. Yes, today is all pre-recorded. But when we went out to our community with this idea, unsurprisingly, the outpour of support and desire to say thank you to the NHS was nothing short of monumental. And to technically set this up, we would not have been able to provide a timely show of gratitude. Today, we have 39 talks running across 2 channels. The second will be starting in 2 hours at 12 p.m. Interaction will still happen though. That will always be a part of what makes Silicon Brighton special. Speakers will either be online answering live any questions or setting up separate sessions that you'll be provided the details with, so you can still pick their brains. We have also appreciated that many will not be able to watch today, so we will upload all talks onto YouTube afterwards so no one will miss out. We are currently mapping out how businesses are adapting and changing to meet the new challenges being presented. So during the day, you will be shown details on how you can access a survey. It only takes a few minutes to complete, and the results will be shared, so we can all better understand how we can rise to the new challenges being presented. Finally, and most importantly, during the talks, you will spot a QR code in the corner of the screen. Hold your phone up against this. It will take you to the Just Giving page for this event. Please donate if you can. Every penny raised today will go to Brighton and Sussex University Hospitals. They invest in improvements to the NHS in Brighton and Hove and Mid-Sussex through supporting the development of services provided at the Royal Sussex County Hospital, the Royal Alex Children's Hospital, the Sussex Eye Hospital, and the Royal Princess Royal Hospital in Haywards Heath. Before we begin today, I would like to take this opportunity for anyone new to us to tell you a little about Silicon Brighton. We have a mission, and that is to drive tech growth in Brighton. And we address that by hosting and promoting events where attendees leave with knowledge and skills gained, and connections made to help them drive both their businesses and careers forward. We all know our city has so much going for it. We are highly creative, collaborative, entrepreneurial, socially responsible. There's great support networks, incubators, communities, meetup groups, transport links, 2 top universities, and a great track record of digital business successes. All that aside, we still believe Brighton has an incredible amount of further potential. When I came here to study 20 years ago, every day thousands commuted up to London, and today thousands still do. So during our events, we put tech companies in front of the technical community. This way, technologists can hear firsthand from local employers what they need to be working on to stay employed here. Also in London, the tech meetups have 100 plus attendees week on week, and we deserve that here. So we give the meetup groups a platform to promote themselves and have additional access to speakers, sponsors, and general attendance. This in turn drives skills growth. And if there's a gap in the meetup space, we even help start new meetup groups. And for anyone wishing to attend a meetup, we provide a central point for those meetups to be identified. And finally, over the years, and still to this day, we see Brighton companies leave here to scale up. There is a lack of investment in Brighton. These Brighton success stories, they have to follow the money if they want to grow. And when they find it, most often in London, they become part of their investors' network and shared resources, hence they stay there. As part of our events, we bring in speakers from outside the region, not just to share their experience with us, but also take away their experience of a city with a level of energy, enthusiasm, and support that is absolutely one to keep a look at, invest in even. And actually, it's this support characteristic that I must emphasize. Since we have been fighting this virus, we have all rallied round each other. Our community spirit makes me so proud to live here, makes me so proud to work here, and it makes me so proud to raise my family here.
Have you asked for consent for the patient?
Well, we're not doing patients, that's why I'm doing staff.
I don't know. Remember that fact when...
It's been hard. You just got to... I just wanted to get through it for my children. Without this lot, I wouldn't have done it. It's been so good.
Did you ever think it would get this bad?
No. No, not in a million years.
First up today, we have Ian Scoley. Ian is VP of Design and Innovation at Safran Cabin. An airline and design industry expert, Ian will examine the future of taxi hailing, showcasing Safran Cabin's groundbreaking work with Uber, and providing a snapshot of how we may have new additions to our skylines much sooner than any of us could have imagined.
Good morning everybody, I'm Ian Scoley, head of Safran Cabin Innovation and Design Studio based in Huntington Beach, California. And this morning I'm talking to you from my home office, or the garden as I like to call it. I figured that since you're all cooped up inside the same as I am, I could take this opportunity to bore you to death for the next 15 minutes with a PowerPoint. So, let's talk about the future of flight, shall we? Okay, well, let's get going. I'm going to start by giving you a bit of a heads up on what Safran does, or more specifically Safran Cabin. Safran itself is a huge organization, and Cabin's part of that organization. And Cabin's mission's pretty straightforward. I mean, we're all about commercial aerospace, but fundamentally here we're to enable better travel experiences, which means safety, comfort, reliability, and efficiency. And all the time we're overlaying those performance criteria on the brand identity and the missions of our customers and the airlines who fly. Safran is a huge corporation. Cabin itself is pretty substantial. As you can see here, there's 6 divisions covering everything from the floor-to-floor interiors to lavatories and galleys. We have a worldwide footprint with over 13,000 employees in 10 countries and a massive coverage within the aircraft supplier base. Along with our sister company, Safran Seats and Safran Passenger Systems, we're responsible for pretty much everything inside the modern commercial airplane. So if you've flown any time recently, chances are you've used some of our products somewhere or other. What I like most about Safran, though, is their incredibly forward-looking vision of the future. Very, very technology-led organization, very led technology company, progressively looking at better futures for our planet and the products and how we use them. That's really a key message for a design organization like ours. But that's about it. I'm not going to talk any more about airplanes. Let's talk about something a little bit more interesting, flying cars. Or as they're known, eVTOL in modern terminology. It's always a struggle to find out what they're called, but eVTOL appears to be the name that we've landed on. Electrical Vertical Takeoff and Landing Vehicles. And this is the stuff of science fiction. So why are we interested in working with eVTOLs? Well, for a start, they tick all the boxes for electric, autonomous and green operations, since these things are going to be used in urban environments using complete battery power. Nice thing for us, they stretch us beyond our current limits. The world of airline cabin hasn't really changed since the late 50s when Boeing introduced the 707. And ever since that time, we've been working within a pressurized cylinder at 36,000 feet. The beauty of eVTOL is it's beholden to none of those rules. There's no specifications to obey, there's no experts currently established, and there's no regulations to abide by. This is all virgin territory, brand new area for us to establish a whole new set of design criteria. Uber, you'll have seen the name Uber around here. Why did we decide to work with Uber? There's over 200 individual eVTOL companies out there at the moment building amazing vehicles, from single-seaters to multi-seaters to commuting vehicles to urban taxis, full spectrum. Very few of them are going to be successful because this is a huge technology challenge. Now, Uber has come to the party and they have a clear vision and a massive vision for the future need of these vehicles. Of course, it's based off their network of ground vehicles, which gives them a head start on understanding how people move in urban environments. But this is projected into a huge scale vision, which is looking at tens of thousands of these urban eVTOL vehicles. And what's beautiful about Uber is they're not planning to build anything. They own the system, they own the network. But what they want to do is to establish a common user experience across all of their future vehicles. So the work that we did with Uber was to develop and establish what we call a common reference model. Why else do we like working with Uber? Well, really the number one factor has to be that they're just hugely customer focused. This is all about passenger experience for them, top to bottom journey value. So we loved working with those guys. Over and above that, it gave us an opportunity to stretch our realm of expertise beyond the usual safe, intuitive, efficient, comfortable environment of an airplane interior. The Uber mission is remarkable. It's basically urban pooled on-demand transportation, which means these vehicles are running 12 to 18 hours a day. They will have a mission of around 8 minutes. They will pick up 4 strangers in a cab. and fly them from one destination to another with a 5-minute turnaround in a seamless multimodal journey using their ground vehicles as well. So basically what it means is, if I want to travel from here, Huntington Beach, to LAX, for example, I can call an Uber now and they will send me a car. And depending on what time of day it is, I could be stuck on the 405 for an hour and a half, or it could take me 35 minutes. What they do with the eVTOLs is they'll assess the journey conditions. If the ground traffic is too severe, they would basically pick you up in a car, take you to a vertiport, put you on board an eVTOL for a short hop to another vertiport, into another car, and then to LAX. So this is what I mean by multimodal journeys, and they have the infrastructure and network to make this work. Very exciting. But it drives a lot of new challenges. And basically what we put together with Uber was what we call the mission-driven cabin. So I'm going to dive into this for a few minutes and tell you a little bit about how that went together. We basically looked at this as an optimization of values across the full mission parameters. And for us, that meant the optimization of the vehicle, optimization of its ground operations, and optimization of its customer experience, which is linked to the rest of the multimodal transport experience. Let's start with the vehicle. These vehicles are scientifically on the edge of feasibility. Electrical vertical takeoff vehicles use an awful lot of power, which means that when they get to their altitude and transfer into horizontal flight, they have to be ridiculously efficient aerodynamically. Otherwise, the math just doesn't work. There simply isn't enough battery power to keep them in the air for the missions. So what that means is that we really have to look very critically at the size and cross-section of the vehicle. 1 extra inch of extra diameter on the fuselage has a catastrophic impact on the vehicle size and weight. So what we want to try and do is to keep the size, the cross-section of the vehicle, minimized as close as possible so that we can make it aerodynamically efficient. Now, when we started the game, this was what Uber gave us. This was their early common reference model, this torpedo-shaped thing, and you see it's got 4 seats in tandem. This was devised by their aerodynamics team. And elegant as it is, it's pretty rubbish for passengers, since it's almost impossible to get in and out of. You'd need 8 doors, ridiculous vehicle. So we had to go through a process of optimizing this. So on the screen at the moment, what you can see is the aerodynamicist view of what the vehicle ought to be. Unfortunately, that's juxtaposed to what the marketing department thought it ought to be. They definitely saw this large campfire seating arrangement, huge amounts of space, and clearly this thing was never going to fly. So we started optimizing. Uber basically settled around a sort of family SUV size. We reckon that could get pushed an awful lot tighter based on what economy passengers are used to flying within airplanes. And then through the process, we arrived at a comfortable medium, which kept everybody happy. We also changed the fuselage section, as you can see, giving the passengers a little bit more headroom, but still keeping that cross-section minimal. This balance was achieved through a rapid series of prototypes. This is a bit of a bizarre image, actually, because it's a virtual reality representation of the 7 physical mock-ups we built to finally come up with the interior seating definition for the vehicle. But this brought us to our ultimate balance. So let's look at operations for a moment. The ground operations of this vehicle, again, are ridiculously critical. It needs to be in the air as often as possible. Its optimum mission time is 8 to 15 minutes. It means it has 5 minutes to turn around on the ground. So in 5 minutes, we have to get 4 complete strangers with their luggage on and off the vehicle safely on the tarmac of the landing field. So again, we put the mock-up and prototypes to work here. We tested multiple seating arrangements, multiple layouts, multiple spacings, different door sizes, and we run hundreds of user testings to get the most user-friendly, easy way of getting people on board. And what it means is we ended up with 3 zones inside the cabin. The 2 zones on the left are for the passengers. The 3rd zone on the right is for the luggage, since every passenger is responsible for bringing their own bag on the aircraft. Uber originally looked at a campfire seating arrangement, which means passengers facing forward and aft. It gives a beautiful opening to the vehicle, a very welcoming approach, but then you have strangers banging knees when they're sitting face to face, and also it's rather uncomfortable when you're trying to back out of the vehicle to disembark. So we flipped the seats the other way around. We went front to front, which is a little bit less friendly for that entrance area, and it also closes off the luggage area to the back. So we flipped the door configuration, opened up the massive barn doors to give us that access to the back space, and we also angled the seats away from each other, what we call the herring bench, which gives a little bit of privacy, and the wedge in between the two seats is a little couch which allows passengers to scoot from one side to the other when they're boarding. So it's super easy to get on the aircraft. And this is the baby with the doors opening. This is the welcoming view passengers would get as they walk across the tarmac to the vehicle. Now, modular design and robust materials. I mentioned earlier on that this is a reference model for Uber. Ultimately, there are going to be multiple aircraft manufacturers building these vehicles, but to have continuity of experience for the passengers, we look to modularity in order to define some common user interface points, the seats, the handles, the touch points that could be used from one vehicle to another without compromising the aerodynamic structure of the vehicle. And likewise, although many of our visions are of the Starship Enterprise for vehicles like this, the reality of its operations are that it's going to be run more like a New York cab, very heavily used by a very, very broad cross-section of people in all sorts of conditions. So robustness of materials and durability were a huge part in designing the interior of the vehicle. Let's look at optimizing the experience for the passenger, because at the end of the day, this is the most important part of it. Uber are very, very heavy on safety, and they have this feature that they call Safety Blue. Sometimes Safety Blue is an implied feature, like a lighting condition that tells you something's going to change, so be aware. Sometimes they're hard points like grab handles or safety belts, that kind of things that are purely linked to safety and security. So Safety Blue is a clear point in the interior of this, along with a lot of other touch points and accessibility aids that let people get on and off and fly safely. The nice thing about the interior is that we've built the seat around existing technology from our sister company, Safran Seats, who are a world leader in helicopter seats. The certification for these seats is very similar to what we expect eVTOL to be. So the DNA of those helicopter seats has gone into the eVTOL seat, which means we have a tried and tested formula for the performance of these critical interior parts. And that's it, in summary, our mission-driven cabin. I have to say this was one of the most rewarding projects my team's ever worked on. From start to finish, it was about 6 months, from the early concepts down to final mock-up that was delivered for the Uber Symposium a year ago in Washington, D.C. I want to give you a couple of key takeaways from the project as well, because this was really important for us. Firstly, in terms of collaboration, I've never really worked with a team or with a group of people with such a profitable way of working. Uber had a very, very clear vision and a very clear value on focus. And what was beautiful about the partnerships, both Safran and Uber shared those values, and we had complementary skill sets that made the whole thing gel and come together. The way of working was exceptional. Within our design studio, we prototype. We test as much as we can. We have a mantra, which is basically fail early, fail cheap, and learn. So this is what we do. We test, and make sure that it's really what it needs to be. Develop a deep understanding of that engagement and use a small dedicated team to do it. And finally, really for top-level alignment, you have to create a business pull. This cannot be an innovation push. You have to have the business and the customer pulling to make things happen. So once again, this was a fabulous project. I'm going to leave you now to the rest of the show and finish with a short video that shows basically how this process worked for you. I hope you all stay safe, and thank you for joining me.
The partnership with Uber Elevate has been fantastic. Everybody has collaborated, added new and additional ideas, and we've been able to take those ideas and turn them into something that's really quite fantastic.
I don't think I've ever seen two teams come together like this before.
And we haven't seen anything this profound in quite some time.
The Uber team and our development team here have just been sparking each other.
Yeah, this was a completely new approach to a brief for a cabin because it's not traditional tube, it's something completely new. It's reissuing a brief for a new way of transporting people.
Safran Design and Innovation Studio is really where the magic happens for us. And it's where we take concepts or early design ideas and turning them into reality.
Our studio here in Safran Cabin is a very collaborative environment.
There's a lot of design agencies out there, there's a lot of engineering organisations, but to have that research and development facility within a manufacturing organisation like Safran is just super powerful.
Here at Safran Cabin, we have the talent and the tools to bring any concept to life.
We get to start with a blank slate, and we can create environments and fundamentally build this cabin together through many iterations, try things that maybe you wouldn't think of.
So taking the high-level requirements of the turnaround time and the 4 people on board and the 8-minute flight, we had to first really understand how large the vehicle was.
We had 6 full-scale mock-ups. There was multiple iterations within each one of those, whether it was the seat or the liner or the window positioning.
So for us, prototyping and building the thing was just a natural progression to get into it and understand how human beings have to interact with it.
I think Uber was very instrumental in helping us do that as well. They didn't say, no, this is what you have to do. They said, oh, where are we going? Let's go there together.
I think what Uber really educated us on is the idea of movement and how their vision of how you move people and goods and services around is really the global picture that we're looking at. How do you take your luggage out of the car and bring it up to the aircraft and put it in? How do you interact with your personal devices or a coffee that you have in your hand that you're able to put in a cup holder in the car, but what do you do in the aircraft? You have 4 people pulling in a vehicle for an 8-minute flight that has to turn around in 5 minutes. And keeping them comfortable and safe along their journey really drove a lot of the design decisions once we get into the actual process of building the vehicle.
We don't want any excess weight, any excess cost, anything to take up space it doesn't need to. But that doesn't mean it's not purpose-built for the mission. The mission requires safety, it requires a comfortable user experience, and requires a seamlessness of all the interactions. And so while the cabin may be minimal in some ways, it's absolutely purpose-built to the mission, and I think that's the important part.
This is a flight experience for 4 strangers, but you don't want to start closing it off and making it private and putting privacy dividers up. Again, it's cost and weight. So the herringbone is just a nice subtle way of turning your shoulder away from the person next to you. You don't feel so intruded. And it faces you out to the window so you can enjoy that amazing view at 1,500 feet, which is just going to be spectacular.
We're looking for complete optimization. Because Uber's building an ecosystem where the entire aviation and transportation community can thrive together. The energy around it makes this inevitable.
Safran is absolutely committed to developing and building and then producing engines and other equipment to go on the aircraft, including a beautiful cabin that we've created for Uber Elevate.
We will see this, and we'll see it fairly soon.
This is like the origins of aerospace again. There's nothing like this has happened for decades, so it's very exciting.
This is only the beginning.
Next up, we have Oskar Holme. Oskar is organiser of Brighton Data Forum, one of the best meetups in Brighton, and he's also senior data scientist from Brighton-based Brandwatch. I absolutely love this talk. It's so incredibly insightful, addressing 3 questions pertinent to current events. What can we learn about the COVID-19 crisis from social media listening and analysis? What can we learn about the COVID-19 crisis from asking people? And what new trends have emerged in this crisis?
Hello, my name is Oskar. As a hobbyist photographer, I like taking macroscopic photos of tiny insects or portraitures of friends, family group photos, landscapes. But my absolute favorite is taking massive panoramas. That is to say, multiple images stitched together, taking in an enormous vista in a single coherent photograph. As much as I'd love to, I'm not here to talk to you about photography. Instead, I want to tell you what my friends and colleagues at Brandwatch have learned about the COVID-19 pandemic over the last month. I realize that all of you will have heard a lot of news about it already. You will have seen the microscopic images of the coronavirus causing it, heard the devastating first-hand accounts of the illness, learned about how it spreads, flattened the curve, followed news on the impact on employment, the economy. I want to add to all of that, through the lens of social media, some new snapshots that both broaden and deepen the panorama that form our contemporary history of this crisis. Now, I will start by introducing the tools used. As I speak, literally billions of voices continuously echo across the web, carrying people's thoughts, attitudes, aspirations, and feelings. The art of making sense of this signal is what we call digital consumer intelligence. Brandwatch offers a family of services in this space to help organizations make sense of what people are saying and seeing online about them, their brands, their products, their industries, their competitors, or any topic really. The flagship product of this family is the Brandwatch Consumer Research Platform. Now, how does it work? You start to use it, you start with a query. A query is a collection of search terms and keywords and restrictions. Brandwatch performs a scan through an enormous trove of public conversations, including forums, blogs, and public messages on social media, the Twitter fire hose. All relevant matches get picked up, as well as their engagement information. These are passed through a metadata augmentation step where, for instance, we detect the language, the topic, keywords, sentiment and emotions expressed for each mention. This augmented dataset is then divided up or aggregated, compared across, depending on the question we are seeking to answer. This process gives insight into what is being said, seen, or shared online, and can be used to understand what people in aggregate think and do. Now, there's another way leading to the same insight. One could ask people. Traditional polling is slow and does not scale well, but Brandwatch also offers a mobile polling service called Curiously. With Curiously, we collect people's responses by bidding on advertising space in ad-supported mobile apps, and we replace the ads with a survey. The experience is that instead of being told what to do, users get asked their opinion. Curiously makes it easy to create a scalable poll very quickly and push it out to millions of mobile phone users anywhere in the world. Responses collected, ready to be analyzed, come back in minutes or hours. The survey can be run repeatedly to track changes or easily revised and tweaked. Curiously's polling methodology has been battle tested in recent elections and has performed extremely well. Using these tools, my colleagues at Brandwatch are collecting and analyzing tens of millions of online conversations on the pandemic each week. Every week, they also collect 1,000 survey responses in each of 8 countries: Australia, China, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, the United Kingdom, and the United States. They track the conversation volumes, detect trends, topics, sentiments, keywords, key terms, emotions expressed, attitudes felt, and more. Everything that we're learning and discovering about the pandemic is available to anyone for free. Just go to brandwatch.com/cv19-resources and sign up for daily updates and weekly reports. The values of this analysis is time sensitive. By the time you get this, what I'm sharing here will be 3 weeks old or older. So go get the latest update for more recent insights. Now, let me show you what kind of glimpses of our times are being captured in these analyses. Now, as the pandemic started to impact the world, companies naturally wanted to reach out to their customers and explain how they were impacted, how they were reacting, or even whether they were staying in business. A tidal wave of such emails was unleashed. And in many cases, these messages were misguided, and they were perceived as out of touch. So people reported getting some tone-deaf COVID-19 communications from companies that they had had trivial interactions with years ago. As a result, the dominant emotion in online conversation on the topic of such emails was anger, not at all what was intended or even expected. But that demonstrates a benefit of listening to the zeitgeist. Companies that pay attention to online conversations fared better. The trick is knowing where you and your message fit in a crisis, what your audience actually wants to and needs to know, and getting this across with clarity while striking the right tone. A good example of this communication mastery came from Slack's CEO, and fittingly it got rewarded with strong positive engagement. Likewise, among the COVID-19 conversation, humor peaked early. In March, the top stories on Twitter that mentioned COVID-19 and earned the tears of joy emoji reactions were, number one, a report that the Florida Police Department were offering free testing for coronavirus of methamphetamines. Number two, a report that the first reported coronavirus case in South Africa was actually a hangover. And number three, a report that a coronavirus conference had to be cancelled due to the novel coronavirus. Now, these stories had the bulk of their shares early in the month. But since March 13th, the date when the United States declared the state of emergency, jokes about COVID-19 get less and less traction. This trend has already deflated the mood for April Fool's Day this year. And indeed, lots of companies did in fact cancel their pranks this year. Knowing how people are feeling matters. Here is a weekly count of unique online authors expressing problems sleeping. It ranges from October 2019 to late March 2020. Now we can see a rise with holiday stress, a post-holiday start of New Year bump, and then that all starts to subside, but flares up again at unnatural speed in early to mid-March as the pandemic emerges. Following up on that, and zooming in, since early March and to the present day, the number of unique mentions of discomforting dreams are on the rise. Now, it is unsurprising that in times of crisis, people's sleep is impacted, though who, where, when, by how much, is not easily guessed at. This demonstrates sensitivity of the social media signal to various aspects of daily life. In fact, we see a similar signal of various lockdown lifestyle trends. Here is a full year of mentions of homemade hairstyles, of which I shouldn't comment, which trended last month and peaked last week with Pink's description of her own attempt on Ellen's show, which got 3 million views on YouTube last time I checked. Now here's another example. Baking at home has never been more fashionable. Delicious pictures of cookies and sourdough bread are certainly cluttering up my feed. Here is a sample of the various topics individually trending and maybe peaking this past month. The point here is that the online conversation is a broadly sensitive leading indicator for a diverse variety of trends and sentiments. Traditional media typically lags, but even when traditional media is up to date with the online conversation, it is by studying the social media engagement with the traditional media content that we know which topics are being considered the most important at any given moment. But now let's change the angle. Let's see what we can learn from asking people directly instead. We polled over 1,000 people in each country on how their eating habits were affected by the pandemic. In all markets, more respondents said they ate more now than claimed to eat less. The biggest gains were in Italy, where 42% said they ate more now, followed by Spain and the UK. China and Germany expressed the least change from before the pandemic. Now, we also asked how respondents have changed their consumption of alcohol since the pandemic. The responses vary by markets, with the UK showing the largest number of people claiming to have changed their consumption, dominated by those who said they drank more than before, 22% versus 15% who claimed decreased consumption. By comparison, Much fewer respondents in the United States reported changes in their drinking, though a lot more of those claimed an increase in drinking, 13%, versus 7% who decreased it. Only in Spain were respondents slightly more likely to have reduced their drinking, 15%, than to have ramped it up, 13%. Now, we found that the already growing purchasing of alcohol online further increased between late March and early April in all queried markets save for China. We also found an uptick in conversations of virtual pubs and remote drinking meetups, online pub quizzes, and the like. At the same time, excessive drinking might be down, according to the conversation volume on hangovers, which is down in March 2020 compared to the previous 3-year average. We can even pinpoint when that reduction hit, in mid-March. But like the excessive drinkers themselves, the conversation volume seems to be slowly recovering. Now, in late March, we asked how respondents described their respective governments' handling of the crisis. Their opinion was lowest in Spain and France. It was quite polarized but balanced in the United States and in Italy, with similar numbers happy and unhappy. Over 50% in China, overall over 60%, and over 55% in the UK, thought their government had handled the crisis well, and Germany came close. In early April, we followed up and polled respondents for their view of whether their respective countries' COVID countermeasures had gone too far. In all markets, the dominant feeling was that the measures were not excessive. The greatest proportion of people feeling the measures being excessive was found in the United States, around 30%. But even there, 40% considered the measures not excessive, indicating a general acceptance of the measures. Generally speaking, the attitudes towards working from home are getting more positive. In Brazil, the United Kingdom, and the United States, we see it rise week after week, even where the dominant sentiment towards working from home is negative. We see it get less so with time as it becomes part of our new normal. But working from home is no longer happening among men and women equally, as it seemed to in the beginning of March. There has been a shift from early March to early April where more women report working from home. Now, I'm just going to wrap up this quick overview by looking to the horizon. By the end of March, evidence of pandemic fatigue had crept in on social media. The number of articles published, the comments attached to them, the engagement with the content, all have started to indicate fading of interest. Published articles on the pandemic peaked on March 18th and have since dropped by approximately 2 to 3% a day. Average count of engagement with the content has also entered a decline. In March, about 14,000 authors wrote about turning off the news or being completely fed up with it. And even that conversation peaked on March 20th. So we may hit our limit for gloomy news a bit early, and at a time where fake news proliferates and official advice is still being updated. But people are not overwhelmingly pessimistic. In the first week of April, we asked for people's outlook, whether they were optimistic or not. The numbers are not drastically different across markets. In China, where the virus is currently under control, around 55% of the correspondents describe themselves as optimistic. Contrasting with about 40% in France, where the virus is very much not contained. At the same time, we also asked how long people think it will take for life to go back to normal. Overall, the most common expectation is 3 to 6 months in every country, which predicts normalcy sometime between July and September. Unlike their differences in outlook, the French and the Chinese have a similar expectation of the duration, with a significant proportion, about 30%, of each believing normalcy can arrive as early as May. Now, finally, despite the name, digital consumer intelligence is about people, not just consumers. Its point of view is complementary to that of traditional media, which tends to lag behind and has a natural focus on the neutral, factual, and analytical. Capturing the online conversation uniquely illuminates some sections of our contemporary history, and what people see form its background, and in the foreground is what they are saying and sharing. To understand these strange times, we can't take the outside perspective of future historians. Instead, we must capture our world from within, using as many angles and lenses as possible. These snapshots, collected and stitched together, can create the panorama we need. I hope these vignettes have demonstrated how social media can broaden our view of this pandemic. Again, they are 3 weeks out of date by the time this airs, so go fetch the latest updates. But before I end, I want to ask you a question about a question. If you could collect 1 billion perspectives, what question would you pose? I will be in the Slack channel in case you have questions. Thank you for your attention.
Hi, I'm Nam. I'm a GP and a clinical lead for the NHS website. Due to the coronavirus outbreak, how you contact your GP, nurse and other GP surgery staff will be different at the moment. This is to avoid face-to-face contact whenever possible and help stop the spread of coronavirus. You should try to contact your surgery online through your GP surgery's website or by using the NHS app or GP online services, or by ringing your GP surgery. Online consultation. To get advice, help or support, go to your GP surgery website and fill in the secure online form to give your GP the information they might need to help you. This is known as an online consultation or an online assessment and helps the practice decide how they need to help you. Where possible, your online consultation will be passed to your regular GP or member of the team. After you complete an online consultation, you'll get a response from your surgery. This could be an online message, such as an email, a text message, or a phone or video call. Video or telephone consultation. If a GP, surgery nurse, or other member of staff need to speak to you about your online consultation, they will contact you. You might be asked to have a telephone consultation with your GP, or most appropriate person in the practice team. Or they may ask you to use a link which they will send to you to join a video consultation at a specific time. Video consultation. During your video consultation, you can speak to your doctor or nurse in a private setting as if you were both in the same room. You will need an internet connection, a well-lit, quiet and private space. You can also have a family member with you if you would like to, a computer, tablet or smartphone. You will need to allow microphone and camera access for the video consultation to work, making sure the built-in camera, microphone and volume are switched on. Some video consultation systems let you test it is working before you start the call. If you need to show the doctor or nurse your problem, you can use the video camera. If it's a place that's hard to reach, such as an injury to the back of your head, you may find it easier to take a good quality photo or recording of the problem beforehand, so it can be shared. You can ask the same questions you would if it was a face-to-face appointment at the GP surgery. And it's a good idea to write down any advice or next steps they give you. While the video consultation will not be recorded, the doctor or nurse will make notes in your GP record in the usual way. You might receive a follow-up online message or text containing further information or links to advice. If something goes wrong during your video consultation, such as the connection being interrupted, your healthcare professional will call you back. If the doctor or nurse feels you need to be seen in person, they will arrange a face-to-face appointment for you, or a home visit. Online consultation should not be used if you need very urgent or emergency care. Call 999 if someone is seriously ill or injured and their life is at risk. If you need urgent medical help, use the NHS 111 online service. Only call 111 if you're unable to get help online. Thank you.
Now we have Pete Jenkins. Pete is an international authority on gamification, lifelong gamer, successful entrepreneur and lecturer. He'll be discussing how to lead a gameful, work-from-home culture, talking through simple approaches to motivate and engage employees. As CEO of Gamification Plus, he mentors and trains companies worldwide on the use of gamification to solve business challenges. To anyone currently leading a virtual team, you couldn't be in more experienced hands.
Good day to you. Welcome to this session on leading a gameful work from home culture, led by me, Pete Jenkins. Very briefly about me, I run local Brighton company Gamification Plus Limited. I'm the CEO. We do all sorts of consulting, training, and working with companies on how to apply gamification principles to their businesses. We've been doing it pretty well internationally, and we won the Department for International Trade Export Award, or the Board of Trade Award, which we were awarded in January 2019. And as a result of that, I've ended up with the lovely title of Export Champion from the Department for International Trade. As a gamifier, I think it's great to have the word champion in your job title, so I had to say yes to that, really. I am also the honorary ambassador for GamFed. I used to be chair. This is the international body for gamification, and there we are all about spreading best practices. So doing things like this webinar are a great idea. I also lecture locally at the University of Brighton on the subjects of gamification and entrepreneurship. I love the mix of games and business, and I've been doing that for over 11 years. And I used to be entrepreneur in residence there as well. I've ended up running the Gamification Europe conference, which is the main conference in Europe around our subject. And also out of that, founded the Gamification Awards, so that's more global. But between the two of those, I get to see quite a lot of the latest ideas and case studies of gamification around. I'm also, as you can tell, a collector of job titles, but I'm an ambassador for Brighton and Hove Chamber of Commerce, and I occasionally guest lecture at other universities such as King's College in London and ESCP Europe, a really great business school out of France. On the screen there, you also see some screenshots from a game called Homescapes. I was thinking about what to put as my favorite game to play at the moment. And I wouldn't call this my favorite game, but I have played like 1,200 levels of it in the last few months, which I think means I'm playing it more than any other, even if it's a bit like Candy Crush, to be honest. And what I really want you to do is tell me what your favorite game is. Perhaps your favorite game, whether it's a board game, video game, mobile game, maybe your favorite game ever, also maybe what you're playing now while we're in lockdown. I really feel like I want to join in the chat as well. So I think I will clone myself. Hello. Hello. Have you spun up as clone? I'm a clone. I'm a clone. What would you like me to? Okay. Okay. I'll dive into the chat while you deliver the webinar. Good idea. Good idea. Right. Looking forward to saying hello to everyone. Brilliant. Now I can be in two places at once. So let us know in the chat what games you're playing, and I'll be joining in over there at the same time. Right, my plan through the rest of this session is basically to look at some simple approaches for how to lead a playful culture in your organization. I'm going to start with why that's a good idea, how to transition from whatever fun you were having in the workplace, hopefully you were having some, to how to do it remotely. Then I'm going to look at why you should be a selfless game playing leader and what that means. And then also about how to choose between synchronous or asynchronous play with your teams. Each has different benefits. So, generally speaking, the research shows that gamification, where it's applied in an organization, makes employees more productive, more engaged, and happier at work. So we're working from that underlying principle. And my friend Bernardo shared this on Facebook the other day. I think it's really timely. But to my parents who said staying home and playing video games would never prepare you for the real world, checkmate. What a useful skill we have right now, particularly if you've been furloughed as well. So what is a gameful company culture, or why do we want one? Well, the research seems to show that a playful business culture leads to higher morale overall, and it can help employees feel a real sense of belonging as well, which particularly now we're disparate and geographically spread, that's really important. It's also been shown that video games can make you less antisocial. i.e. more social. This is particularly useful right now as well. My cloned me is probably going to put some of these links in the chat as well while we're going along. And the last key benefit, I mean there are others, but these are my favourite ones, is that playing games actually makes you more creative as well. And there's some great research about that. It can expose you to really imaginative worlds. I really like the world of Journey, the game Journey. And games challenge you with all sorts of challenges to help you create and solve problems, which makes you more creative as well. So how do we move from one place to the other? I don't know what your workplace looked like. Were you playing with Lego, like I've got on screen here? Or did you occasionally, a few of you, go to the console corner together and play some Super Mario Kart? In fact, why don't you tell me in the chat what games you played? Yeah. So for instance, I really like table tennis. I missed that. It's difficult to play against yourself. That's me looking quite competitive there on the screen. Some people like to solve puzzles. This is one we brought into the co-working space, the projects, a while back. And some people like to play collaborative, cooperative games. The last game we basically played in person as a team was Pandemic, which is maybe a little bit topical right now, but it's a really good cooperative game. It's quite challenging and gets you working together in teams. So let's hear in the chat, whichever side it is for you. What did you play at work? Now, for me, also, you've got to watch out. They mean, what games you play mean different things to different members of staff. The game I'm really missing right now is playing table football or football. I found it a really useful mental break that broke up the day, particularly when I got stuck creatively. I could go and do it. Also, I'm pretty super competitive, so I would really, really get into it. To other people in the team, it was a chance to bond, chat, and catch up. Although I found that if I was chatting, I was losing concentration and I wouldn't win. So I didn't really catch up over it. But I did bond over a game. So what did the games you were playing in your workplace, what were you getting out of them? Let's add that into the chat as well. And then I thought, there's different things that we get from different games. So I broke them up loosely into three different types. Exciting ones where you get the mental release and you're feeling competitive. So that's games like the table football for me. And what might that look like online? Well, things like Fortnite's Battle Royale is quite a cool way of getting that excitement all at the same time as a bunch of other people. I really like bonding games, so cooperative games, stuff where you play together, you can share failures, successes together. And then also, can we put together or find learning games, which appeals to other types? So you've got word and puzzle games, quizzes, things like that. And they all add different elements to your playful culture. So how do you go about finding replacement games? Well, first thing is, you don't have to do it all yourself. The first step in the playful culture is actually to ask your staff what games they'd like to play. And in fact, you should find that they quite enjoy thinking about it. I put a post out a few weeks ago now, asking my staff, and the first response was, "Ooh, exciting, fantastic." So do that first. Right, the next step. Why you should be a selfless game playing leader. Well, what is that? Well, I think you may have already realized I'm quite a competitive game player, and that's not necessarily the best way to bring all your staff with you on this playful journey. I'm going to illuminate this point by showing you how I got it wrong, first of all. With my colleague Vasilis. In fact, a while ago, he suggested a game himself called Battle for Polytopia. So he found it, he suggested it. I really liked it. And maybe I got carried away playing it on super difficult level, and I'm now quite good at it. But as soon as we were remote working, I challenged him to a game. But I was probably too good. And very swiftly, the conversation went along these lines. "You're too good, perhaps we could play something else." And I'm still quite enjoying the game at this point, but very early on, he resigns from the game. In what way is that good for morale? And it wasn't much fun for me either. He got replaced by a bot, which was, it's much more fun to play other people. Now, luckily, I then got it right with another member of staff, Kira. In this instance, she chose the game, which was Word Blitz, and she wiped the floor with me. She was really, really good. And we're still playing now. I don't enjoy it quite as much because I lose. But it's good to be engaged with a member of staff with the game of their choice. So in other words, to build a playful culture and to be a selfless game playing leader, you need to be prepared to play anything. Yeah, in order to show that playing is allowed, that it's fun, that you don't have to win, even though you're the boss, and that you're prepared to back your staff choices. Interesting side effect of this is you're also increasing the amount of trust and autonomy in the remote working situation at the same time, through the use of games as well as in the projects and things you might be working on. So as an example, with my staff, I would even be willing now to play a game of Mario Kart, even though I know I would be that kart in last place, because that's really not my type of game. I'm not good at those. Not good at those at all. So be prepared to play anything. What about what I was talking about with synchronous and asynchronous games? So synchronous is where you play at the same time, and asynchronous is turn-based. What does this mean? Well, synchronous, the fun side of this is I've seen quite a lot recently people using the game Kahoot for virtual pub quizzes and things. And that means you're all playing at the same time. It's quite exciting. Maybe you can even see everyone on the screen and doing it. Okay. Asynchronous is not happening or done at the same time. So a good way of thinking about this is where you just take turns and the other person can play whenever they like. So in this example, works with friends. I take a turn, then someone else takes a turn, maybe a few hours later, maybe the next day. It's up to them. So what are the pros and cons of these? Well, synchronous games, they're much more exciting. Yeah? Everyone's playing at the same time. It's a heightened social experience. We're really bonding well, and it's quite exciting. Asynchronous games are a bit more practical, though. Yeah, you can work it around people's different working hours. Some of my staff are part-time, and in fact, between all of them, there's not one single day where everyone is working. So it's really difficult to find a time where I could ask everyone to play a game together. So an asynchronous game allows, once again, for more autonomy, letting staff choose when and where they work and play. To put all this in perspective, there's some great statistics. There's a chart on the screen, which is actually that the most engaging, the most amount of engagement we get from playing games is pretty much almost exactly as strong online as it was when we were in the same geographical location. So here we've got cooperative games with our friends in the same location, a certain amount of engagement. Pretty much exactly the same level of engagement, maybe even slightly more with male friends if we're just with the same friends playing a cooperative game online. And it's not that different for a competitive game where we're playing against friends. So that holds great hope for how we play games together remotely in our teams at this time. And it's not just about games, by the way, playful culture. So we can look at a practical work example here. We use a system called Gel, which enables us to do a daily stand-up meeting asynchronously. Well, so a daily stand-up meeting is where everyone on the staff says what they accomplished yesterday, what they're working on today, and whatever challenges they're facing. But they choose when they can put that data on the system, and then the system shares it with everyone when it's complete for the day. So once again, it's trust and autonomy, but I also feel part of a bigger team of people working on stuff. It's a nice way of looking at those type of products as well and sharing. And I just want to end with some ideas on how you could get started with something like this. I was thinking about the next virtual meeting you may hold. I've got a tool, one of the tools in our set that I really like using is the player journey, which is a 4-phase journey of discovery, onboarding, habit building or playing the game itself, and mastery. So basically, discovery is about getting people excited about your game. Onboarding is about getting them comfortable with it, understanding how it works. And habit building is playing the game itself. And then mastery is what you do when you've finished or when people are really good at it. So if this was a Dungeons and Dragons inspired meeting next time, which I just started playing with my daughter, because it can keep you busy for hours, by the way. Top tip for playing with children, Dungeons and Dragons. So if I was going to do this about my next virtual meeting, the discovery phase, I might create some suspense, get people excited about what might happen. Something different is going to happen at this next virtual meeting. What is it? What's it going to be? In the onboarding phase, I'm going to send them some preparatory materials, set the scene, maybe let the attendees know what to expect, maybe start choosing potential roles they might be playing during the meeting. During the meeting itself, I'll get people to play those different roles, whether it's a mage or a wizard or something a bit more realistic or real world, like a chronicler or minute taker. I might make up some roles like professional cynic or the blind optimist, so people have different approaches to how they interact with the session. Just remember, this first time or two, you're the dungeon master, so you're choosing the scenarios and the challenges they face to make it more interesting. And then at the end of the mastery phase, how do we celebrate the successful meeting? We can celebrate it in some way, send a certificate, give them some experience points. Maybe that helps towards building a character that enables them to play differently the next virtual meeting. Yeah. Or give them a virtual item as a reward. Let me know how you get on with gamifying your next interaction with your remote team. We've talked about a few different games throughout this session. And I said a good place to start is to ask your staff what games they're playing. Now, sometimes when you ask people outright from a blank sheet, they haven't really got, they have a sort of creative blank moment. So we've put together a list. This is my colleague Ella. She's put together a list of games that people are playing at the moment while they're stuck at home. And we've sourced this from the gamification community for the most part and put them together all in a blog post, which my clone is going to post the link into the chat for you right now as well, or you can scan the QR code and go to the page. And there's some ideas to get you started on games to play. And at the moment, I would really like to help people actually put a playful culture in place as fast as possible. So I've started the Gameful Leadership Guild. First group met last week and is meeting again tomorrow, if I've got my dates right. This is a weekly online meeting facilitated by me in small groups to help people leaders who are implementing a playful culture or gameful remote working culture. I run it in an action learning style so that we learn from each other in a confidential space so we can talk about real problems. And you come back the next week and you say exactly what you implemented, more problems you overcame or need to overcome. The first 2 sessions are free to attend. And I imagine after the initial sprint, because I want people to really actually get their remote gameful cultures working, it would move to a more traditional bi-weekly or monthly approach after the pandemic. But that'll be up to the group to decide, probably. I think that wraps it up nicely. It reminds me to say thank you very much for playing. These are lots of different ways of getting in contact with me. And if you want to book a free 20-minute video call with me, you can scan this QR code and just choose a slot that suits you. You can talk about anything gamification related, ask me about the Gameful Leadership Guild, or just top tips on your remote culture, and set that up. Choose the slot that works for you. I'll probably share a link to this in the chat as well, won't I, clone? Yeah, good. Excellent. Thank you very much. Goodbye for now.
They could not believe that they didn't have to pay any money. Because the Northeast, there was a lot of unemployment straight after the war, and we were still in rationing then. And they could not believe that if they had something wrong, they could actually go to the hospital or the doctor and they wouldn't have to pay any money. You know, a home delivery, if it was the 4th of July, was 1 and 6pence. But if it was born on the 5th, it wasn't anything. And that 1 and 6pence after the war bought a loaf of bread to feed the rest of the family and a tub of margarine. That's the reality of what we take for granted now. When I went to outpatients, I noticed how desperately poor the people were after the war. They were really, really poor, and they could not afford the health insurance they had. I know it was only a penny a week, but even that was hard. So therefore we were handed these little infants, or these infants that were well advanced in their bronchitis or their pneumonia. The difference being that the parents were more relaxed. They didn't have to pay. So they bought their children and their families when they were just starting their problems.
I think after NHS came in, we did things were happening all the time. I mean, when I first went in, there wasn't a drug to, lower blood pressure at all. So it really was nursing, the best you could do in your nursing. And I think that was a great difference once the NHS came in.
England sent this quota to Grenada asking for nurses to come in to help them out in their workforce in the NHS, in the nursing. So I took the advantage of that. I applied. I was interviewed in my country in Grenada. I passed my interview. Papers came up to England, and England accepted me and wrote back to me and tell me they will have me in October when my training will start. Hence, my presence in England from 1966. And I never regretted it. I love the profession. I really enjoyed it. And I didn't want to retire.
But it's still a wonderful profession for people to come into and get such satisfaction from being there, from doing what they do to me, and what I've seen them doing during my career. I mean, the improvements that have gone along, and the possibility of being part of those improvements is such a challenge and a wonderful aspiration for people. To my mind, a wonderful organisation. The best job in the world.
Stuart McSkimming is the Chief Information Officer for the incredible Royal British Legion. Whilst we have our own experiences moving to remote working, only a handful have had responsibility, not just for themselves, but 1,500 others. Stuart, who actually lives in Brighton, will be discussing the Royal British Legion's move to remote working. It's a top story with a dose of cyber criminal activity thrown in for good measure.
Hello, my name's Stuart McSkimming and I'm the Chief Information Officer at the Royal British Legion. I'm delighted to be talking at Silicon Brighton as a long-term Brighton resident. One small upside to the current situation we have is that I'm no longer commuting to and from London, so I get an extra few hours in a day. So this gives me time to give interesting talks, such as discussing our moving to distributed working. So before I talk about that, I would just like to tell you a little bit about my organisation. So probably one of the things we're most well known for is the Festival Remembrance. This is run every year in November at the Royal Albert Hall. But alongside that, we also run a variety of services for veterans, including 6 care homes, an advice and support service through a national network of pop-in centres. We offer nursing assistance through our network of Admiral nurses, and we also offer support with independent living for veterans. We have around 1,500 staff, some of those work in care homes, but a lot of those work in office type jobs. And one of the challenges we've had with our generally office-based staff is working out how we could get them working remotely. So how did we prepare? Well, at the start of February, we started looking into exactly what we had in terms of our remote access capabilities and reviewing it. We became aware that there was a small chance that staff may have to work from home for a certain period of time. Back in February, we predicted that it wouldn't be longer than 1 month. However, we still had it as a fairly low probability, but we wanted to understand were there things we could do which were low cost, but would enable us to work from home more easily if it were required. On the positive side of things, we were already using the Office 365 environment. We weren't using it very much. We were using it for Exchange, Outlook, email, as many people were, and we had some plans in place to roll out Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, and some of the other collaboration tools later on in the year. On the negative side of things, we had an outdated remote access environment. So one of the things that we wanted to really understand as part of our planning was how well people could work from home. And so one of the things we asked them to do is actually we asked people to see if they had the right equipment to run trials and, if necessary, to request laptops. We also decided we better accelerate our plans around replacing our remote access environment for staff working at home. By the time we got to the 12th of February, we'd realised as an organisation that there was a strong chance that there might be some disruption. So we declared a serious incident and we started to make contingency plans. Within our care homes, they were already well into their planning and they had well-rehearsed plans around infection control. Within care homes, they quite regularly have infections they have to deal with, and so are pretty adept at handling situations like this. Obviously, COVID-19 could be on a different scale for them, but their plans were reasonably robust. As an organisation, however, we were pretty used to the status quo of working in an office, as were many others, and we had to put some effort into trying to ensure we had the right equipment and the right software available. If we move forward 3 weeks to the 3rd of March, when things were already beginning to look like there was definitely going to be some change coming, at that point we'd issued just over 100 new laptops to staff in a 3-week period, which was pretty much a record for us in terms of rolling out equipment. We realised that stocks were running low within the UK of laptops because we weren't the only ones who were trying to do this, and it was compounded by the fact that China, as a manufacturer of laptops, wasn't manufacturing laptops at nearly the same rate they were before. However, we weren't as concerned as we might be because we didn't actually have any outstanding requests at that point. We thought we'd successfully got staff to request laptops and issued them. By the time we got to 10th of March, we had actually run out of laptops at that point. And it was also becoming apparent that there may well be an extended period of working from home by the time we got to the 10th of March. On the 16th of March, that was the date when the government made various announcements asking staff to work from home if they could. And as an organisation, we told staff that they should prepare, or they should be working from home for the foreseeable future. So on the 7th of March, then the very next day, our head office in London Bridge was much quieter than normal. I went into the office and there were probably about 20 to 30 staff in the office, and we were really just in support mode, trying to ensure that staff had the equipment they needed, giving out things like headsets here, the new essential item for everyone, making sure that we could help any staff who had laptops they needed assistance with. And we found that over the following days that we kept a couple of support staff in the office just so as they could help out any staff if they needed. Obviously, this was before the more comprehensive lockdown a few days later. We did find that we were giving quite a bit of support to staff. There were several staff who had laptops that had been at the back of their cupboards and they discovered that they no longer worked when they got them out. There were simple problems like some staff didn't have broadband. Whilst we'd considered did they need a laptop, we couldn't really do much about staff who didn't have broadband installed. And there were other issues that people would have, just more fundamental issues. So perhaps their laptop, they did have a laptop, but there were some things that didn't work on it, or it was out of date, or perhaps it didn't work very well. We even found that there were some staff who were working on their own equipment and trying to get things to work. And it turns out that some of them were running Windows 7, which was a surprise given it's gone out of support on their home device. But some people were running Windows XP, which was even more of a surprise. And so we tried to give people help where they could. So that was the 17th of March as we got used to this. By the 18th of March, we thought not so bad. It was been busy, but we were probably still in the denial stage, I'd probably say, there, as the world was changing. But on the 18th of March, something else happened. We became aware of a significant cyber threat against our organisation. Now, I know lots of organisations have struggled a bit with phishing attempts and cyber threats since the move to working from home. It's a whole different environment where you have staff using company laptops, but also using their own devices, and not being in the office where they can simply turn around to another person and ask them, is this normal? Have you got this email? Should I click on this? Shouldn't I click on this? So following that, we had to take quite a few steps to increase our security and rebuild some of our remote working environments, which really made things quite challenging for us as an IT team, given we'd already been working pretty hard trying to get everyone working remotely. And on the second day of remote working, we then had to rebuild lots of our remote working environments. So that really took us quite a bit of extra time. But once we'd got through that, we then moved into the next phase, which was really about trying to ensure that staff could work and collaborate as best as possible. And this was really about taking an existing project that we had and turbocharging it, giving it a shot of adrenaline. So we had already a project where we'd planned to put forward a business case to roll out some of the Office 365 products, such as Yammer, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. And the plan had been that we would get a business case to our board by the 14th of April, and this would detail a rollout over the following year. As it happened, we realized that this was just way too slow, and actually that this was going to Teams, the use of Microsoft Teams would be a game changer for us as an organization if we could get these tools out there. So we took a decision that rather than trying to get the business case by the 14th of April, we would actually try and go live by the 14th of April. This was quite a change for us in the way we worked, and quite a change for us as an organisation. But we thought that people have a very strong need and will to make the change, and working with the partner that we were already working with on Office 365, we already had quite a bit of background information that would help us with taking some fairly quick governance decisions and decisions on training, decisions about how we might roll it out, how we might structure teams and departments and groups, and how we would be able to offer all the support that we needed to. So this was probably one of the most interesting rollouts that I think I've ever done in my life. And we did manage to achieve it. And I've now started to ask myself questions about perhaps have we taken too much of a relaxed approach for rollouts in the past. It's interesting how you can move on and change. So I guess thinking about things, unfortunately, it's not 28 days later, because that would have made things perfect. It's actually 35 days later now as I'm recording this this talk. However, in that time, we have launched and trained our organisation on Teams, OneDrive and Yammer. We've retired our old remote access solution and replaced it with Windows remote desktop services. We've introduced multi-factor authentication for all of our external access. We've managed to keep some of our business as usual projects going, such as we were in the process of replacing our wide area network, and this became business critical, particularly for our care homes, because we wanted to be able to ensure that we gave them the best connections possible when they're dealing with some very challenging circumstances, and we're making a lot more use of Skype calls and being able to talk to people when perhaps they were under lockdown and they couldn't actually get staff in or out of their buildings. So that was particularly interesting. We kept that project going. There were other projects which we managed to keep just about on the road. We did put several things on hold. But one of the most interesting things is we've had an awful lot of feedback, and predominantly this has been very good feedback from very encouraging staff who've said they've been really helped by the changes we put in place and the support we've been able to give them. We haven't had all 100% good feedback. We've had some people who've struggled, and one thing particularly we've noticed is that when you're in an office environment, you can always go and turn to your friend or your colleague. If you're having problems getting something to work, you can ask them for advice. But when you're working from home, that's not always possible. So people have struggled, some people with lower levels of IT literacy, or perhaps even just where they've got equipment that hasn't worked as well, and we've had to give them a lot more support. And so we haven't managed to completely ace out on our fantastic feedback, because we have had some challenging feedback as well. But overall, we're feeling that we've made some amazing changes in a very short period of time, which we don't feel we would have ever achieved in any other environment. And really, it's been the support of our staff and the willingness of people to accept change. And I think for me, that has been probably my biggest learning point of this, that I think often we talk about organisational capacity for change, and we look at some of the exercises and projects and initiatives we're undertaking as an organisation, and we wonder, can staff within the organisation cope with this level of change? And I think what I've learnt over the last month is that people are so much more adaptable than you realize or you remember when you're in your everyday life, and if necessary, people will adapt. And so organizational capacity for change has ballooned in the last month, and we've brought in so many changes, and staff have all had to deal with working remotely. But ultimately now we do find that we have got an organisation which is functioning remotely, whereas I think if you'd asked me in January to pull together a project to get us all working remotely by mid-April, I think I would have said it was impossible. I think most of our senior management would have said it was impossible. So it's been a very interesting set of challenges we've had. Normally at this talk I say any questions, but I think probably this format is probably will allow maybe online questions or questions grouped together at the end. I do really hope you found my story interesting. As I said, my name's Stuart McSkimming. I'm the Chief Information Officer at the Royal British Legion, and I thank you for taking the time to listen to my talk today.
Hi, my name's Alex Phillips. I'm the Mayor of Brighton and Hove, and I just wanted to wish everyone well during this extremely difficult period that we're currently all experiencing. And thanks so much to everyone who has already supported the Brighton Silicon NHS fundraiser. It's so important that we get behind the NHS because their work is really valued, and so many of us wouldn't be able to live our lives without them. And to really support the NHS, you can donate, but you can also follow government guidance, which is to stay at home, and if you do have to go out, to remain 2 meters away from other people, and to carry on washing your hands as frequently as possible. I wish everyone well during this difficult time, and if you do experience severe anxiety or any other issues, please do contact the government website, and they can then put you in touch with different avenues that can be of help. Thanks very much.
And returning for his hat-trick of appearances at Silicon Brighton, it's Steve Bustin, a local communications and keynote speaking expert. Steve will be helping us to understand how better to work with our teams remotely. So whether you're used to working with dispersed teams or you're new to the task, Steve's talk will help you go away with the tools to make sure you can do that more effectively.
Hello, it's Steve Bustin from Get Your Voice Heard, and I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about how you communicate with what tends to be referred to as a remote team. Now, we're going to talk about that language in a minute and whether they are remote or not, but what I wanted to do is give you some ideas to maybe freshen up the way that you are communicating with a team that are dispersed, that are spread out. At the moment, we're all working from home, or the vast majority of us are, but this isn't just about lockdown. Because nowadays more and more teams are spread out. They are working from a number of different offices. They might be working internationally. In fact, sometimes you're now going to have a mixture of home workers and workers based in an office space. And we need to be able to communicate with all of them. They need to feel like part of a cohesive team. So this isn't just about lockdown. This is about communicating with a team that are spread over a number of sites. And these are just tips, ideas, ways to get you thinking. Because I do hear a lot of people saying, oh, but we've got it's all set up. You know, we've got Slack, we've got Zoom, we've got emails, we've got FaceTime, we've got iMessage, we've got Skype. Does anybody actually use Skype anymore? It does seem to have disappeared. Don't know where. But actually, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are a cohesive team. That just means you've got lots of channels to communicate with that team. It also means you've got lots of channels with which to interrupt your team. And again, I'm going to explore that a little bit in this talk because it's important to understand when people want to be communicated with, and how people want to be communicated with. Because if you don't get that right, you're not only doing your team a disservice, you're doing your business a disservice. So it's something we need to experiment with. And really what I want to do today is just give you some ideas to freshen up your communications, to get you out of a rut, make a few changes, but I'd invite you to examine how you currently communicate critically. It's very easy for a leader, whether that's a team leader, whether that's a managing director, to assume that everybody likes communicating in the way that they like communicating. So if you happen to be a great fan of sending people a text message, or you just want to, can we jump on a Zoom call? It's a phrase we're hearing a lot. Just because you like doing that, just because that's your modus operandi, doesn't mean that's true of your team. And actually, yes, your team do get to have preferences as individuals. And we're going to explore that a little bit as well in this session. Because, okay, there are times when you need people to communicate with you in certain ways. But also, if you can find the ways that your team members like to be communicated with, the way they like to communicate back, that actually can set you in really good stead. So the other thing I want to start by saying is, if nothing else, make sure your team have the correct kit to communicate effectively. Make sure they have laptops or tablets that are powerful enough to cope with, clearly with Zoom, which is becoming a much bigger, a much more processor-heavy software with every single weekly update at the moment. So make sure they've got the kit that can cope for them to communicate in the way that you want them to be able to communicate. If necessary, particularly while people are working remotely, working at home, think about maybe supplying with a mic. Maybe you need to supply them with some lights. The other thing I'd really suggest you do, though, is you supply your team with training. Make sure they have been properly trained, A, on how to use the software. I mean, with Zoom, it's actually quite a steep learning curve if you haven't used it much, particularly if you're suddenly hosting meetings. So make sure that people have been trained on how to use the software to its maximum advantage, because quite frankly, you're paying for it. The other thing is you're paying for them, your staff, so make sure they have had the training and coaching that they need in how to present online, particularly if they're talking to clients, even more so if they are pitching for work, if they are representing the business to try to bring new business into you. Make sure that people have had training. Just because they've had presentation skills training or coaching doesn't mean that they can make the switch into online presenting that easily. It's quite a different skill set because clearly there's no feedback from an audience. So there are people out there who will obviously will coach your team, and yeah, there's someone quite close to home here who is, it's one of the things I do, is I will coach people on how to present online. So let me know if you want more details on that. Anyway, let's dig into the first of the points I wanted to make today. And this is that I don't think you should refer to your team as remote. And it's become a sort of buzzword. People say, oh, you know, we've got a remote team, or we're all working remotely. To me, that says cut off. That says siloed. That says really separate. It doesn't say cohesive team. And I think this language matters. If you, by using this phrase remote, are telling your team, well, actually, you are remote, we're almost holding you at arm's length, I think there's a problem. And I think if you want to build a cohesive team that communicates well together, think of other words. One of the words I'm hearing more and more is about dispersed. We have a dispersed team. I think that's really nice. Or distributed. Interestingly, the team behind WordPress don't have a physical office. They are a distributed team. That is the phrase they use. And I think that's a really nice team. We are distributed widely. And maybe other words you could use, we have a diffuse team. Even just, we're spread out. But one of the words I think you should try and avoid using to refer to your team is virtual. Unless you are working in a virtual reality environment and you all have avatars set up, you're not a virtual team. That again is rather distancing. I think it just sort of says, actually, these aren't real people. These are just avatars. They are people again at arm's reach. So think about the language you're using. Don't refer to your team as remote. Don't refer to them as virtual. Think of other words you can use. What suits you and your setup? Because don't forget, this might be national, this might be international. I think you're a dispersed team or a distributed team, diffuse, spread out, something like that. I think it's much nicer words. So the second point I wanted to make is about an important part of communication that tends to get forgotten, and that's listening. Listening is a really vital business skill. It's particularly a vital leadership skill, and it is one that so few people have ever been trained on or have really understood what listening is about. Everybody goes, oh yeah, I listen all the time. but actually, are you really listening? Now, those of you who saw me speak earlier this year at the Silicon Brighton event at Platform 9 in Hove will have seen this. This is the Shannon-Weaver model. Now, this is a model of communication that's been around for donkey's years, really since the late 1940s. And it comes in and out of fashion. But I think it's a really interesting way to think about communications. And this forms the basis of a lot of the consultancy work I do with big businesses. Now, it's about having an encoder. So somebody who sends a message, it's encoded in some way through language, through tone of voice. It might be through facial or body language, if somebody can actually see you. There's then a channel. And that's your chosen channel of communication, which might be an email, it might be a Zoom call, it might be a text message, it might be a face-to-face meeting. And then the message is decoded, so the recipient will have their own language and tone of voice and mood and all those things about how they are hearing what you're saying, and then hopefully it reaches the recipient. Now, the two interesting bits here on this model I want to dig into a little bit more. First of all, is this idea of a feedback loop. Now, this is about listening, getting feedback from the person or people that you are talking to. And I would ask you to question, what is your feedback loop? How are you taking feedback? Now, this is true, particularly if you're working with, if you're selling to customers, you need to be listening to those customers through that feedback loop. And it might be that if you're selling to consumers, that is on social media. You're listening to reviews and comments and posts on your social media posts. And that's a really good source of feedback. If you are selling to businesses, that feedback loop is often around customer satisfaction surveys, results-driven, ROI, all those sorts of things. You need to have some channel in place. So when you're talking to a remote team or a dispersed team, again, you need to have a feedback loop in place. How can people feed back to you that they have heard you, that they are listening? Because if they can't feed back to you, you've got no way of knowing that they are listening. So you've got no way of knowing whether they're going to act on what it is you've said or maybe you've asked them to do. So the feedback loop's important. And let's just dig into this idea of listening a bit more, because that's what it's all about. Don't multitask. If you are listening to somebody, do not try and do other things as well. And this, I think, is particularly true on platforms like Zoom. There is a real temptation to be checking other things, to be looking at your emails, to be looking at other messages coming in, all this sort of stuff. If you are listening to somebody, don't do that. Take away all the distractions, switch on Do Not Disturb, turn off notifications, put any physical distractions out the way, and just talk to that person. The other thing that I think is important on this is eye contact. Now, most of us will have a webcam at the top of our laptop or clipped onto the top, or maybe you're using a phone or a tablet. Look at the camera as much as you can. Now, inevitably, our eye line wanders a little bit, as it would in normal conversation. If we look straight into somebody's eyes the whole way through a conversation, it can get a bit intense. So try to look at the camera as much as you can. And don't start typing or tippy-tapping on the keyboard. If a person you're talking to can hear it, they know that you're not paying attention. So go full screen, make eye contact with that person, and look at the camera, not just at the eyes of the person you're talking to, because then it'll look as if your eye line is further down the screen, which is distracting. And do not mute yourself or them at any point during the conversation. Muting yourself so that you can be tippy-tapping on your keyboard, it's a distraction. And don't forget, the person you're talking to can see that you are muted. Likewise, if you mute them, you are shutting them up. A normal, natural conversation will flow between the two of you. Now, yes, we know online there can be a slight lag, but you have to deal with that. So make sure that you are listening. You are listening intently and you are listening properly. And actually, I would often try and repeat back the points you have heard that person make to make sure that you've understood correctly. And that goes into this whole encoding, decoding thing, because what they said may not be what you've understood them to have said. So make sure you check before you go on. So that's second point, make sure you're listening. The third point I want to talk about is, or still tied to the Shannon-Weaver model, is this idea of noise or interference. Now, on any conversation, there are always distractions. There are always things that can degrade the quality of your conversation. So when you are dealing with a dispersed team, when a lot of your communication is going to be online, just things like poor tech, a laptop that's not keeping up, poor broadband can really cause a problem. If you are struggling to get bandwidth, just make sure things like cloud-based backups are switched off. If necessary, connect yourself with an Ethernet cable straight to the broadband hub, particularly if you're working at home, rather than using Wi-Fi, because if other people are using the same Wi-Fi, it degrades pretty quickly. So that can be noise. Any distractions are definitely noise. And that could be as simple as other things, other noises going on in the background, other people chatting, can be very distracting and will actually stop effective communication. So think about what distractions are going to be there for you and for your team and remove them. I think another distraction is poorly managed meetings. There's a lot of noise in poorly managed meetings. And here I'm talking about online meetings, really. There's quite often you'll find one or two people are able to dominate an online meeting. It may just be they've got the loudest voice, may just be that they are super confident. And make sure that person who's dominating the meeting isn't you. A lot of people, when they're in a leadership role, will actually speak far more than their team. Try to let the team speak more than you. Be in listening mode, not in talking mode. The other thing around noise or interference is if you're dealing with an international team or an international audience. Now, clearly, there can be language difficulties. There can also be things like time of day. If you're talking to people in Asia or in the US, they can be in a very different time of day to you. There can also be cultural encoding going on. So they're not necessarily going to be understanding the language you use. Maybe you're going to use slang. Maybe you're going to use cultural references that just don't resonate with them. Those count as noise because they will actually stop effective communication. So make sure that you understand what is causing interference, what might be causing a breakdown in your communications, and deal with it as eloquently and elegantly as you can to remove it. So that's point 3. Let's move on to point 4. So the fourth point is that you need to be more than just a good manager or leader. You need to be a decent human being. Empathy is key here. Really, to build rapport, to make a connection, you need to be empathetic with your team members. And you need to be a person, not just the boss and the team member, actually to build rapport, build a relationship with them. And really, as I say, it's about empathy. So when you do speak to them, particularly if you haven't spoken to them for a little while, ask about them. Ask about their lives, particularly if they are perhaps working from home. Maybe they're not seeing huge numbers of people. They actually may be really glad for the opportunity just to have a bit of a chat, to reflect on where they're at, what's going well for them, maybe what's not, but not just about work. Inconsequential is important. Ask about what they're up to, ask about their kids, ask about where they've been, their garden, what they're listening to, what they're watching, all these sorts of things. You're sort of going for the water cooler chat here. That sort of way of building relationships, getting to know somebody a bit better, getting to know who they are, a bit more about their characteristics, that will make it easier to communicate with them on a long term. I would also suggest that part of being a decent human being when you're communicating is to communicate little and often. If people get long gaps between communication, it's actually much harder to then build that rapport. So aim for shorter, more regular conversations, or at least contact. It doesn't even necessarily have to always be the spoken word, but do set out to have regular contact with people. And I would always aim to keep them or keep yourself up to speed with what they're doing, but also keep them up to speed with what you're doing. Make it a two-way process, because actually what you're doing is going to impact on what they're doing, and it's part of helping them to feel as if they are part of a coherent team. So talk to them about what they're up to, how that fits into the broader picture, maybe how it dovetails with what you're doing, how you're going to take whatever they're producing and use it to further the whole team's goals. So ensure that there is a two-way to it on that one. I'd also, at the end of a call, write them a follow-up email, particularly if there's been actions agreed or deadlines agreed, for example. Send them an email just saying, great to talk to you. This is just where I think we're at. This is what I'm looking forward to seeing from you, and this is when. And it just helps to check in, a bit like talking about listening just now. It's that thing about, have you actually heard them? Have they heard you? Has that understanding happened, or has there been encoding and decoding going on? The other important one on this is let the team member finish the call. It should be them who decides when this meeting or this chat is over, rather than you. So it's quite often, if you are suddenly going, right, I've got to go now, there may well be something important that they have been struggling to articulate, or they've been procrastinating about talking about. So always ensure that you have the time to let them take as long as they need to communicate what they need to communicate, and then let them decide that the call is now over and it's ready to ring off. You might need to prompt, is there anything else? What else is going on? that sort of stuff, but let them make that decision. I think that's important. So don't just be a good leader, be a decent human being. Let's move on to point 5. Now, I think a bit of FaceTime is good time. Now, I'm not just talking about FaceTime, the app here. I'm just talking about actually getting face-to-face with people. I think it's important that you get people on camera if you're working as a part of a dispersed team. Some people will be resistant. There are people, I've worked with teams where people are, oh, no, I'm just going to use an avatar. Or I'm just going to have a box with my name in. I would actually go as far as say that is not allowed. It's not often I say that there should be absolutes, but I think that is out of order now. I think we need to be able to see each other. If not, there is a suspicion about what's that person hiding. If you have got somebody in your team who is really, really anti being on camera, maybe talk to them one-to-one, just find out why, if necessary, get them some training, try and understand what it is that is causing that. It may be that they just feel that actually their home environment, if they're working at home, isn't suitable to be on camera. So maybe you help them think about what they can put in the background, backdrops, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, don't allow hiding to go on, because there is a trust issue starts to become a problem. But I would find out from your team members how they like to be communicated with. They are allowed to express a preference here. If you've got somebody who just loves being on camera, they love chatting around, they love the banter and things, great, go for it. But if you've got somebody who actually prefers stuff in writing, maybe they prefer working on instant messaging, do that from time to time. Doesn't mean to say that you're not going to say once a week, for instance, we need to have a Zoom call so I can see you, but understand that the rest of the time they prefer stuff being written. So think about how they prefer to be communicated with. And it does mean that a one size does not fit all. You may have to be using slightly different channels for different individuals. Clearly there's going to be an overall channel if you've got a group message to get across. But when it comes to that one-to-one interaction, try and find the channel that your team member prefers, and you will get better communication out of them. I'd also encourage them to be in touch with other people, not just with you, because you need the team to be cohesive. You need them to feel they've got colleagues, that they're not just reporting to you, that actually they have responsibilities to each other. So encourage them to have maybe a virtual coffee, maybe a virtual lunch or virtual beers. Actually, a Friday beers online can be a really nice way to do it. You say at 5 o'clock, it's down tools, grab the beverage of your choice, and if people just want a glass of water, that is absolutely fine. And let people banter. How's your week been? What's been good? What hasn't worked? What you're up to over the weekend? All those sorts of things. All the sort of chatter that would normally happen in an office environment. You need to help them recreate that. Just be aware, if you are working with an international team, that one person's beers is another person's breakfast coffee, and behave accordingly. But make sure that those people who are working overseas are included. And it may be that every now and again you change. So one week you might have a breakfast, so that people in other time zones, actually for them it's beers, and vice versa. So a bit of FaceTime is good. Make sure that you're seeing people and that you are actually chatting face-to-face with your remote team. So that was point 5. Let's move on to point 6. Don't expect your team to be online constantly. Just because you like firing off text messages at 8 o'clock in the morning, or you want to be able to just email the whole time, or you're on Instant Messenger or WhatsApp the whole time, doesn't mean your staff need to be. And that's something that a lot of leaders struggle with. They feel that their team should be available the whole time. There should be constant communication going back and forth. But you need to allow 2 things. A, you need to allow downtime. You need to allow people who are working remotely to take the same breaks as people who might be in an office. In fact, quite frankly, you need to allow your people in the office to take breaks as well and ensure they are. Downtime's important. It's important because it allows for much more free-form conversation. It's not work-related. It allows for relationship building, but it also allows for people to recharge, to empty their brains a bit, to come back refreshed. So you need to allow downtime. The other thing, though, you need to allow people is work time. When you are thinking about getting in touch with a member of your team, sending them an email, dropping them a message on WhatsApp, however it is, just put yourself in the frame of mind that they are in the middle of a really vital piece of work that they are doing for you, something you asked them to do. Do you really need to interrupt them? Should you interrupt them? Or actually, could your message wait a while they finish that vital piece of work? So just think about, do I need to send this now? It might be that if you sent it at the end of the morning, when people are going into their lunch break, or you send it at the end of the day, or the beginning of the day, that actually it will allow people blocks of work time. It's very easy for remote teams to just constantly interrupt each other, because in an office you might look up and you can see that somebody is hard at work, or they've taken themselves away somewhere quiet to work. You can't do that remotely. So just work on the assumption they're doing vital work, that you shouldn't interrupt them. And encourage the use of do not disturb on Slack, on other channels, on WhatsApp. You encourage them to turn off notifications, but then agree times when everybody is going to be available to chat. Maybe you're all going to come online, join a Zoom meeting, whatever. Beginning of the day, end of the day would be great times to do it. And allow the conversation to flow. But ensure that that is work time. This is not about expecting people at their break times to then have the communication between colleagues. If you like, think of that as their communication between friends. Communication between colleagues happens on work time, and you've got to make time in the working day for them to do that. So that's point 6. Don't expect people to be online all the time. Although actually, I'm just going to add to that. I'm just thinking about this. A couple of other points, I think, just on this before I move on. If you do need something done by a certain time, you need to explain exactly what that deadline is and why it's important. So if you do need somebody to send you a certain document or to review something by a certain time, I would send them an email or a message saying, I'm going to need this by 4 p.m. because I need to get it to the client by close of business, or because I've got to present it to the board tomorrow morning, or whatever. So give them a deadline and tell them why. So often people say, I need this by 4 o'clock this afternoon. And it feels arbitrary. I think if you can say, I'm going to need it by 4 o'clock because ... then I think you'll get a better response, and people are more likely to respond to that deadline because they can understand the bigger picture. That's what it's really about. And actually, the other one is don't expect instant decisions when you are using chat servers in particular. Instant messaging services are not great meeting spaces. They're good conversation spaces. And I suppose I'm thinking particularly of WhatsApp here. There's a problem if people start chatting and trying to make decisions in places like WhatsApp, it becomes groupthink. One person will come up with an idea and everybody will go, oh yes, that's good. And suddenly that's the decision. Whereas if you were in a meeting space, Zoom meeting, or even in a physical meeting room, actually the conversation, you might interrogate that idea more, examine it, critique it. Other ideas might come in, you can build those ideas together. So just be aware that online chat is not a great place for making decisions. It's not a place to have meetings. Set up a meeting room on Zoom and do it there. Keep online chat for other conversations. So just another point. So yeah, I just wanted to update point 6 on that one. So let's move on to point 7. Have different channels of communication for different purposes. Now, I think that you need to start to differentiate between the multitude of different communication channels that most businesses and organizations have these days. The problem is if people don't associate certain channels with certain types of communication, it becomes much easier for them to ignore. So, I mean, for example, it's been interesting. I'm aware now, for me, if somebody wants to get a quick response at me, if they send me an instant message, a WhatsApp message, Facebook Messenger, whatever, I probably respond to it faster than I do if somebody sends me an email. Email has sort of dropped down my priority list at the moment because instant messenger is right there. It's much faster. So I think you need to have clear channels for different things. So, for example, if people see an email come into their inbox from the team leader, from the boss, they know that this is going to be an important announcement. Whereas if something comes up on, let's say, a WhatsApp group, they know it's going to be a more discursive point. So think about differentiating different channels. And as I said earlier, for example, WhatsApp, not great for meetings. Zoom, much better for meetings. Have different spaces for different functions and different types of messaging so that people know what to expect when they go into certain types of channels. In the same way that if somebody, if you walk to the coffee bar or the water cooler with somebody, you'd have a very different conversation with them in an office than you would if you actually sat down in a meeting room, for example, which tends to be much more formal. I think chat systems are brilliant. Slack, Microsoft Teams, whichever one you're using, there are a number of them around. I think they're great. I would suggest having a number of different channels, partly so people can opt in and out of the ones they need to be part of. They can monitor some with more urgency than others. And it also just helps to keep conversations separate. Otherwise, conversations get mixed very quickly. By all means, have a general chat channel, but I would have separate channels for separate projects so that different parts of the team can come together to work on those projects. Have a water cooler channel. Have somewhere where people can just gossip, chat, talk about TV, all those sorts of things. I'd also suggest having a sports channel. Otherwise, if you've got a number of sports fans, sports chat can take over a water cooler chat channel very quickly. So I would actually hive off the sports stuff, have a football channel or cricket channel, rugby or whatever, so people can go and talk about that separately. Otherwise, the water cooler one will tend to get a domination. I've seen it happen so many times. I'd also have a channel called something like Boast or Celebrate. And it's a place where people can go in and boast a bit, celebrate their successes. You know, it's great. I've cracked this. This client has just told us how great they think we are. Or I've just lost this amount of weight, or I've just raised this much money. So it can be a personal boast, it can be a professional boast, but it's a really great place for people to celebrate. It really brings people together incredibly quickly. The other channel I would suggest is called something like I need help with ... And it's a place where people can go in and just say, okay, I'm struggling with this. I need help with Zoom, or I need help with this spreadsheet, or I need help with my bike that broke on the outside. People will ask for all sorts of different help. And it's just, again, a great way to start building a cohesive team, people helping each other. And also means that you're fostering a culture of asking for help if people are struggling, which is really important and is actually very difficult to do otherwise in a remote team. I would also then suggest on another channel is email. Use email judiciously. No one needs more emails in their inbox. Goes without saying. I would use emails for announcements, for disseminating news. But if you want to have a discussion, I would go onto a different platform, probably a chat box. I would also say if you are emailing out, if you find yourself emailing more than, let's say, 3 people at a time, is email really the best way to go about it? Would you be better off actually calling a Zoom meeting and disseminating the information the same way? If people start receiving emails with lots of people CC'd or BCC'd, they will realise it's not addressed to them, it's general, it is therefore generic, it is therefore less important. So if you're CCing lots of people on emails, I can guarantee you that actually your communication is going to be less effective. Look at other channels to disseminate the same information. I think also keep your emails short, keep them to the point, bullet point them rather than big blocks of text. And if you need people to respond to certain points, spell that out at the top. Here are the details of this project. What I need is your response to points A, B, and C by 6 o'clock tonight so that I can review them overnight and we can then put the report together tomorrow morning. Something like that. So have a really specific call to action. So that's point 7. Have clear and different communication channels for different purposes. So let's move on to number 8. Now 8 is really just, I want to give you some do's and don'ts around online meetings. Now, nobody really loves meetings, whether they're online or offline. They're a necessary evil. They're a good way to bring people together, disseminate information to a lot of people at once, all that sort of stuff. So, they are a natural part of any business. Couple of things I've already mentioned. Don't use chat rooms for meetings. Use proper meeting rooms like Zoom or a webinar software, for example. And if you are doing a big meeting, maybe you're doing a big cross-company meeting, look at the chat settings, and you can restrict the chat settings to people so they can only respond to everybody. What you don't want are lots of separate little meetings setting up and people running a little back channel and chatting or gossiping or bitching or whinging or whatever. So I would look at your meeting settings when you've got everybody in one room and you want everybody to be able to hear everything rather than dispersing off into other conversations. Make sure you have an agenda. Make sure it's an appointment in people's diary. Send them a diary invite. And on the whole, with an online meeting, if you can keep it to 15 or 20 minutes, I think you're going to be serving your team much better. There's an awful tendency for meetings to get long, to get bloated. They don't follow the agenda. Short and sharp. And part of that is setting an outcome in advance and then again restating it at the beginning of the meeting. By the time we finish meeting, we need to know this. We need to have decided that. Have a really clear desired outcome, and I think that will set the meeting up to be much more succinct and much more focused and much more successful. I'd also question, do you need to have another meeting? Is the meeting the right channel? Could this be achieved in a better way? Could you have, would this be better on a chat channel? Would this be better as just an announcement in an email? When you do have an online meeting, I would follow up in writing, particularly if there are agenda points, action items, that sort of thing, things that people have committed to doing. So I would just send out an email listing them afterwards. Just say, these are the things that people have agreed. And again, you're checking that people have understood and agreed to things the way that you understood them. Sometimes there can be a mismatch. People go, sorry, I hadn't realised I'd said that. And it might be that you had actually decided you wanted that person to do it. They hadn't actually said they were going to do it. So a follow-up email or another document, maybe a Google Doc, allows you to capture that, lay it all out so people know exactly what's expected of them. So that's point 8. Meetings, few do's and don'ts. No one needs another meeting. I think that's what I just say. Keep them to a minimum, keep them short. So let's move on to point 9. Bear with me, we've only got one after this. We're almost there. I think you should be looking at some of the tools. There are hundreds of tools that are around to help keep track of your team. Now, this isn't necessarily about monitoring performance, but just keeping tabs on how your team are feeling, how they're doing, what's their mood, what's their state of mind. Check in with them about how they feel. And actually, that can give you a huge insight into why things are or aren't happening. One of the tools I just thought I'd mention is this. This is the Nico calendar. And this tracks the mood of your team. Now, it was invented in 2005 by somebody in Fujitsu, because Nico means smiling in Japanese, which I think is lovely. Because what this does is you have a line for each member of the team. This can be as high-tech or as low-tech as you want, quite frankly. Certainly at the end of the day, some businesses do it at the beginning and end of the day. Everybody marks with a smiley how they're doing. So a lot of people will use 3 or 4 gradations. Typically, there might be, I've had a great day, I've had a good day, I've had a so-so day, or I've had a horrible day. Now, this is not a monitoring tool at all and should not be used as such. This is a check-in tool. This is a way to, it's a litmus test, if you like, of how your team are feeling. And you should encourage honesty, but you should also encourage people to explain why they've had a great day or maybe not such a great day. And because a great day might have a number of reasons. It might be that, they've had a big client win or they've put a project to bed. It might simply be that the weather's been lovely and they're just in a really good mood. And conversely, if they say they've had a horrible day, it might be that they've struggled to get a piece of work done because they feel they don't have the support they need. Or it might just be that they're feeling a bit under the weather or they've been a bit cold sat at their desk. So it's one of those things where it allows people to check in with each other. You will start to get a feel for the mood of the team, and you do not pick people up if they've had a bad day necessarily. It's not that you go in every single day and say, oh, okay, I can see you've had a bad day. Why? What can I do? But look for trends. Look for patterns. If you've got a swathe of teams having bad days, or always, if you've got lots of people having great days, but you've got lots of people having great days and 1 or 2 people having not bad days, what's going on there? Why is that? It's about the team dynamics, not necessarily about the individuals. So there are a couple of ways you can do this. If you're in a physical office, this can be a poster on the wall and people actually stick stickers on it. People love it. And actually having a team gathered around it to put up their sticker and saying, I've put up my so-so day sticker because, is a really lovely way to signal it's the end of the working day and bring things to a close. If you're working as a remote or dispersed team, then I think you're clearly going to do it online. There are lots of tools to do it, but maybe have an associated Slack channel or have a Zoom meeting for people to add that explanation. Without the explanation of why they've had that type of day, it's far, far less powerful. But I think it's a really interesting tool as a way of just checking in, keeping tabs on it, and you should take part as well as leader. We recognise that we all have so-so and terrible days. It happens to all of us. We can't all have good days every single day. But it's an opportunity to be honest and open and explain why things are the way they are. So that's point 9. Look for tools to help to keep track of your team. So final point. Well done for sticking with me for this long. And the final point is quite simple. Do something different. Don't get stuck in a rut. Change things up a bit. Keep it fresh. It keeps it fresh for you, quite frankly. It keeps it fresh for your team and will keep your communication much more effective. If you're just doing the same thing week after week or day after day, people will start to ignore it very quickly. It becomes part of the furniture, if you like. So look and think about what you can change. So for example, you could change the channel. If you always send a weekly, so let's say an end of week email with a roundup, could you do that face to face? Do it on camera, send it a video. If you are always having meetings, good way to change those up, because obviously if you're doing them offline, you can change venue, you can change the layout of the room. Online, that's trickier, but I would suggest have a rolling host. So if you have a weekly meeting or a daily meeting, each time you have a meeting, another member of the team hosts that meeting. And it might be they call on the people who are going to speak, who are going to present, and they would share questions and things. And that should include the most junior people in the team right up to the most senior. It's a great way for people to get to know their colleagues, great way for people to raise their profile within the team. And it also gives people that sense of responsibility that every now and again, this meeting is in their control. So having a rolling host is a really nice way to change up meetings. But any type of communication, change the frequency, change the routine, give it a bit of personality. For example, if you always send out an email for a particular type of communication, or you always post on Slack or WhatsApp, maybe add an image or a GIF, even a video. Just a different way to say things, just to liven up, to make it stand out. Because if every week you just send out a text-only update, and suddenly this week has a GIF, people are going to notice that, and they go, well, that's different, that's new, that's changed, and they're going to re-engage with it in a way, whereas otherwise it's just like, oh, this comes out of you, I know what it's going to say, it's always the same. So think about ways you can change it up. Keep it engaging, keep it fresh. So thank you for bearing with me this long. I hope that's been helpful. As I said at the beginning, these won't all apply to every organisation. Think about the things that you can take and freshen up in the way you communicate with your dispersed team. Think about the language, think about the channels, think about listening, think about what's causing noise and interference. Think about how you're actually building rapport with your team, how you're allowing some personality into it. Because if you can keep your communications fresh and effective, your business will benefit in the long term. And let's face it, that's what it's all about. Now, if you've got any questions about this, you want to go into more detail, you want to chat it through, or if obviously you'd like me to come in and work with your business, you can check me out on getyourvoiceheard.co.uk. You can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm Steve Bustin. Actually, on Twitter, I'm @StephenBrighton. You can drop me an email, steve@getyourvoiceheard.co.uk, and I'm on the usual platforms. So I'm always open to, let's have a virtual coffee, should we say, have a chat, and very happy to answer your questions. So thanks for watching this far. Really hope you've been able to donate to the NHS, because it's, quite frankly, it needs all the money you can get at the moment, all the help. So hope that's been helpful. Hope your communications are good, and on to the next speaker.
We are very appreciative to have with us next Anna Golawski. Anna is an expert in mental toughness and leadership management, and will be helping us to better understand how to thrive in stressful or high pressure situations. In what has been a stressful time in one way or another for us all, Anna will also look at how we can build resilience in order to handle things better in future.
Hello, my name is Anna Golawski, and I'm the founder of Stratus Coaching based down here in Brighton. And I'm going to be talking today about how we handle pressure and stress in the workplace. Obviously, in these very challenging times, it's probably more prevalent than ever, but a lot of us all the time are handling various challenges, adversity, setbacks. So it's really important for us to understand how our minds work and how this can affect us, but also more importantly, what can we do to better handle the pressure and the stress? It's not going to go away even after coronavirus, even when things get back to normality, whatever that might be. We're still going to have stuff to deal with on a regular basis. So I'm going to be chatting to you about handling pressure and stress and how we can deal with it going forwards. I've been working in this area for coming up for 12 years now. Previous to that, I had various corporate jobs in HR and marketing, and I've been working with various clients over the past 12 years or so, looking at how we can build up resilience, deal with pressure, and just generally improve mental health and well-being. So I hope you find this useful. So let's see if I can share my screen. I've got a couple of slides to show you. So handling pressure and stress at work. So we're going to be thinking about what is stress. I mean, it's one of these words which is bandied around by everybody, but what really do we mean by stress? It's probably slightly overused and not always in its correct context. We're going to be thinking about the difference between pressure and stress. So why is it that sometimes we're under pressure, but actually we're absolutely thriving? You know, we're working to our best, we're working to our deadline, we're being effective. Other times we can be under pressure and we just can't think straight. We can't see the wood for the trees. We have difficulty handling our emotions, you know, being irritable, just coming up with solutions, ideas and stuff like that. So what is it that makes the difference? What are the triggers? But also really importantly, it's a self-awareness to know what is your own stress signature, you know, so what is your signs that tell you that you're beginning not to cope as well as you'd like to be, so you can actually do something about it. So starting off on that, I always like to start off thinking about our mental health in general, because we all have mental health. We are on this spectrum of mental health, you know, throughout the days, and this can be up and down, very much in the same way that our physical health can fluctuate and change. The key thing is to really think about whereabouts are you on the mental health spectrum so that you can intervene and do something and bounce back sooner rather than later. Again, it's a little bit like our physical health, so the sooner you notice that you're coming down with a cold or sore throat or something like that, you can rest, take paracetamol or vitamin C, whatever, and help yourself get back to feeling great and healthy again. So more specifically, what is stress? Because sort of, you know, stress is obviously a key part of our mental health. It's now overtaken all other reasons for being off sick from work. According to latest statistics, you know, it's a huge problem and increasing all the time. I think recently the figures have increased by sort of, you know, millions in terms of the lost days at work, the cost of presenteeism, the cost of absenteeism and sickness-related absences is huge. So what is stress? So if we were going to Google stress, it will come up with round about 1.7 billion results. And when I was doing a similar presentation to this a couple of years ago, and I was Googling stress and the definition of stress, it came up with about 600 million results. So this is trebled in terms of the results that comes up. So, you know, again, this is obviously something which is on people's radar. People are sort of trying to sort of, you know, find out a lot more about it. The definition that I like to use with people is the one from the Stress Management Society, because it's not too clinical. It's really a situation where the demands on us exceed our ability to cope. You know, it's exceeding our resources, it's exceeding our maybe expectations, it's testing our competence, it's draining us. It's that point where it is just absolutely too much. We just can't cope anymore at all with it. And I really like this definition actually, and it just kind of you know, link into the engineering definition of stress, which is the stress point of a piece of material, a piece of metal, for example. You know, what point does it actually snap and it bends? You know, and that's the key for us as well, really. You know, stress is the point that we get to where can't cope anymore and we've just kind of snapped. And stress is here to keep us safe, ultimately. We need this stress response to keep us out of danger. We don't want to, not have stress in our lives. We don't want to not have the stress response in our lives, because without that, we wouldn't be able to jump out of the way of a tiger. You know, for instance, this is what we originally had stress for, to sort of, to keep us safe. But we're not always evolved for our environment, so it's not really appropriate or sustainable, or even sort of, required really to actually sort of carry on in a very stressful state of being in the workplace. You know, if every time that we thought someone was approaching us, they were going to attack us like a tiger, then we're going to, be very anxious. It's really going to impact on our mental health and also our physical health as well. Stress, what happens to us when we're in a stressed situation is that our cortisol levels and our adrenaline levels rise. We get that sort of, high alert state. We're on the lookout for the tiger, we're on the lookout for the animal that's about to attack us. Our blood sugars rise, we get loads more sort of blood rushing around our bodies, trying to give us that energy to run away. And you've probably heard of the phrase the fight or flight. There's also fight, flight or freeze. So either we choose to try and take flight and run away from the stressful situation, the tiger, whatever is about to attack us, or we might try and fight it off with whatever means that we can. Or we're just so overwhelmed that we're just absolutely frozen to the spot. So it's the fight, flight or freeze that we can go into. Adrenaline and cortisol levels raise, blood pressure raises, a heart beats faster, it's trying to give us this extra oxygen, extra blood rushing around just to give us that energy to run away. You might have also noticed when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling anxious, that you get butterflies in your stomach. A lot of people talk about that kind of tension that they get in their stomach. And that's because our digestive system is trying to close down. So if your mind thinks that you're about to be attacked by a wild tiger and you need to run away from it, the last thing it wants you to do is to sit down and have a big Sunday lunch and then try and run away from the tiger. So what your body does is it has the butterflies to stop your digestive system sort of wanting to be hungry and eat food. Some people go the other way during stressful situations when they've been sort of feeling stressed for a long time. They reach for the comfort eating, the sort of the junk food, the sort of the cake, the chocolate, those kind of like things, as a way of coping with the stress symptoms that they're dealing with. The other thing that happens to us as well is our sleep patterns get really interrupted. Again, because if our mind thinks we're about to be attacked by a tiger, the last thing it wants us to do is take a little nap and relax and fall asleep. So if you notice that when you're feeling very stressed, that you can't switch off, you're very agitated, you're very sort of twitchy and you just can't sit down, that is because your body has got so much excess energy, it's preparing itself to fight off the tiger. It's on the lookout. The last thing it wants you to do is go to sleep. So that's why people say they either can't fall asleep in the evenings, they have real difficulty switching off, they might wake up in the middle of the night in that sort of panic mode, and they might wake up really early in the morning, again, immediately feeling very anxious. They're on the lookout, they're being very vigilant for the tiger. But what are the causes of stress? And I'm just going to sort of share my screen again with you. And as you can see from this diagram here on the screen, there's loads of different sources of stress and pressure out there. The one on the right-hand side there, world and society, at the moment, thinking about coronavirus and everything, it's a huge source of pressure on a global pandemic scale. We often hear about work-related stress, and this is something which I think gets a bit of a bad press. Again, sort of, thinking about the current situation, there's a lot of people saying at the minute that they're missing work. They're missing their teammates, that routine, that structure. So I think although we do get a lot of work-related stress, work isn't always the bad guy. If you've got great colleagues, a boss who's giving you sort of good work to do, empowering you, feedback, it's a healthy organisation, then actually going to work is generally much better for people's mental health than not being in work at all. Other source of stress and pressure is family and community, and also ourselves. We put a lot of perhaps undue pressure on ourselves and undue stress on ourselves to do the best that we can, to exceed expectations and stuff like that. So lots and lots of sources of stress and pressure. These, again, they're going to vary from time to time. Sometimes people are going to find that it is sort of, their family or their living situation is causing stress. Other times it might be more worldly factors, or it could be the job itself. So huge variety. And the key is really to identify where does your main source of stress come from, so finding out the source of the stress. There's no single magic cure for stress. There isn't any quick fix solution to this. The key to dealing with any sort of stress and pressure is really identifying where it's come from so that you can deal with it effectively. So that's all the different sources of stress. What makes you stressed, though? So if I was going to ask you what makes you stressed, could you list down, maybe sort of the top 5 things that make you stressed? Pausing and reflecting, what is it about those situations that's making you stressed as well? And is there something that you can actually do about being stressed? Because we are all so totally different. What makes one person feel very stressed could be exciting to somebody else. It could be water off a duck's back to somebody else, totally differently. So there isn't one situation which is sort of global that makes everyone stressed. But there are a couple of factors that sources of stress have in common with each other. So the kind of typical things that are going to make us feel more stressed is when we're caring about something. So one of the factors is when we're trying to protect a loved one, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, if it's something that we really care and we really value, we're going to have, possibly have it as a source of stress. So that's why, if people are not being able to meet their mortgage payments, meet their rent payments, pay the bills, if they're at risk of losing their job, this is going to be a massive source of stress then, because, it's something which is important. They need to look after these things. We get worried about friends and family because we love them and we care for them. The more that we care about our job and the people that we're looking after, the more potential it has for us to feel stressed about it. The other factor in terms of feeling stressed is if we feel that we're going to be judged negatively. If we feel that we're going to be judged, criticised, viewed in any way, that can be a source of stress for us. So that might explain why going for interviews or presentations or public speaking can be incredibly stressful for people, because we're putting ourselves on show. People are going to see us, they're going to have a comment, and particularly with social media, the world and his wife can comment on things now. So being judged, being criticised, being sort of, putting your head above the parapet, it's a common source of stress. And the third one is when we can't control something. So if a situation is beyond our control or beyond our abilities, we're going to feel stressed. That, for example, could explain public transport. So if you're stuck on a plane or train, not that we are the current times, but if you're stuck on transport where you can't get somewhere and there's nothing you can do about it, it's going to be incredibly stressful. If there's time frames, if there's deadlines, if there's expectations that you can't push back on, it's going to be stressful because you've got no other way of dealing with it. So the three factors that can cause us the most stress are things that we care about, so the things that are really important to us and are valuable. Second one is if we're going to be judged or feel that we perhaps could be judged or criticised or perceived as negatively. And the third one is things which are out of our control. So if you're trying to identify why you're feeling stressed about a situation, it's probably because it's ticking one of those three boxes. And why do we sometimes feel that we're dealing with loads of pressure and we're thriving, we're in the zone, we're in the flow, we're we're coping with loads of stuff, we've got energy, we're being decisive, we're coming up with ideas and solutions. Other times we can feel that we're absolutely drained. Well, one of the ways of showing this is to think about our stress in terms of a stress bucket. We have stuff that flows into what we call our stress bucket or our stress container on a regular basis. This could be stuff that we're dealing with day-to-day basis, whether it's trying to get all the family out of the house in the morning, dealing with the commute, dealing with just stuff, big, little, whatever flows into our bucket. We have the tap at the bottom of the bucket, and this is what we can do to deal with the stress. So if we're doing stuff that's really healthy, really positive, and helping us cope with the stress, it stops the bucket of stress from overflowing. There are other coping mechanisms that people look to do when they're under stressful situations. They could be drinking, drugs, gambling, smoking, all of those kind of things. So what we're ideally looking for is the positive, healthy coping habits that we can do when we're feeling stressed. And the key is to try and stop our stress bucket from overflowing, because that's when we start to get irritable, snappy, don't feel that we can deal effectively with the situations. We talk about the emotional snapping. So this is when people get very, very irritable. They're snapping. They haven't got the patience. They haven't got the tolerance for dealing with the little things in life. So just thinking about your own stress bucket. And I think it can also help us be more empathetic to other people, because we don't know what else is going on in other people's stress buckets or stress containers. You know, we can't tell from the outside what people are dealing with in their lives. So just kind of like knowing that their stress bucket might be overflowing can sometimes, you know, help us be a bit more tolerant, I guess. Not always, but sometimes. One of the other things about handling stress is knowing your stress signature, as we like to call it. So what are the signs and the symptoms going on that might indicate to you that you're not coping with things quite as well as you'd like to do? You know, so what are the signs, what are the symptoms that just give you an indication that when you think about the mental health spectrum, what is it that sort of, you know, suggests to you that you're going from healthy to coping to struggling to really not feeling too great? There's a whole variety of things. And again, you know, in the same way that we all have different sources of stress, we all have different stress triggers. You know, I certainly know what would make me feel incredibly stressed would be karaoke or any public singing whatsoever. Just the thought of that would make me feel incredibly stressed. But, you know, other people pay good money and enjoy it and do it for fun. So each to their own. And in the same sort of vein as that, there's various different signs that we can look out for that can indicate to us that we're sort of, you know, beginning not to cope as efficiently as or effectively as we might want to be. Some of those in the yellow circle, as you can see, it might be more physical things. So people often say that they get headaches, or they just, because their immune system is suppressed, they get lots of infections, or, you know, sore throats, coughs, colds, whatever. Muscle aches and twitches, you know, if they've got lots of adrenaline and cortisol running around their bodies. Breathlessness, and the skin irritations. Quite a lot of people say that they get eczema flare-ups, or problems with their skin if they're feeling particularly stressed, and fatigue, you know, because our brains are just trying so hard to sort of, you know, try and deal with the situation, try and come up with the solutions, but we're probably not sleeping very well either. So, you know, those two coupled together aren't going to be very good for trying to get through a stressful situation. Some of the other symptoms in the sort of like the pinky, purpley, lilac coloured circle might be more sort of, you know, thoughts and stuff like that in our minds. So we might be worrying about things more. We might get things out of perspective. Very muddled thinking, you know. So this is when we just can't think straight. We can't think logically. Our brains are sort of jumping all over the place. Our judgment can be very impaired as well. You know, we might not be making the most rational, sensible decisions that we'd normally make. That's if we're making a decision at all. So some people say that they become very indecisive. They can't come to a conclusion or a decision, or they become very hasty and just want to make a quick decision to go away. We might notice that we feel very negative. So again, this is the whole kind of, you know, pessimistic sort of, you know, tone and outlook starts overtaking us as well. And this could also manifest itself in odd dreams or nightmares. Some of the more emotional things in the green coloured circle is where we might feel more fussy, losing confidence in our abilities. So again, it then becomes a bit of a vicious circle. If you're feeling stressed, you can't make a decision, then you lose confidence. It's going to sort of, you know, undermine that. Irritability, sort of, you know, depression, and apathy. You know, just kind of, you know, giving up a bit and losing sort of, you know, interest and stuff like that, and sort of switching off. Some of the other ones, more personal things, low libido, accident prone, loss of appetite, drinking, smoking, eating more or the wrong things, and insomnia. So there's various signs and symptoms to look out for. The key thing is to know what is your stress signature. You know, what are your signs that are personal to you that you think, actually, you know what, this is a sign to me that, you know, things are building up, they're getting on top of me, and I need to do something about it sooner rather than later to be able to bounce back. So one of the questions, I guess, is coming back to why is it that sometimes, you know, we can feel that we're absolutely thriving under pressure, but not so much when it gets to a stressful situation. So if I share this diagram, so this is what we call the pressure and stress curve, and it's often used in sports psychology to help sports people and athletes deal with the pressures of performing in professional championships, etc. So what this shows to us is that as the pressure on us increases, our performance increases. So you can see the arrows on the axes there, both going along. So if we don't have enough pressure on us, we can actually be quite bored. You know, if we don't have enough of a deadline or engagement or motivation, we can actually feel sort of quite lethargic. So we do need a little bit of pressure to motivate us, to engage us. And when we get about the right amount of pressure, that's where we get to the peak of our performance curve. That's where we get to the optimum performance. You know, that's when we're very clear in terms of the expectations, the outcomes, the deadlines, the pressures. We feel that ultimately we can do it. You know, it might take a bit of extra effort, but ultimately we feel that we can actually achieve what's expected of us and we can do it to the best of our abilities. And this is ideally where we're looking for people to perform. This is where we want our sports people, our footballers, our athletic people to be performing. This is where they're going to be winning the championships, the competitions, the medals, etc. This is their peak performance in sports. So if they're on the bench, they're going to be in the low pressure and the boredom. They're not going to be at the peak of their physical fitness. But if we start going over and beyond the optimum performance, this is where we get into the stress zones. This is where people become very stressed, very anxious, and the performance, as you can see there, starts to go down again. If we had people in the sports world who are going beyond their optimum performance, this is when they're overtraining, they're working too hard, they're training too much, and they're going to be more prone to injuries, they're going to be more prone to exhaustion, and they're not going to be winning, they're not going to be at the peak of their physical fitness and performance. So it's worth just taking a moment just to think, whereabouts are you on the pressure and stress curve? You know, are you sort of gearing towards the optimum performance, and what are the factors that help you work at your best, or are you in the sort of the high stress anxiety part and you need to sort of do something to get back to the better performance? So how can we do that? You know, so how can we sort of better handle pressure and stress to keep us in that optimum performance? Well, I guess this kind of like ties in with resilience. You know, resilience is all about sort of coping with setbacks and challenges and adversities, and we're dealing with stuff on a daily basis. And there was a research done by Harvard Business Review a couple of years ago, and they were looking at what are the common kind of things that test our resilience levels. And the researchers, they kind of expected the big stuff, you know, the divorce, the moving house, the weddings, the bereavements, you know, those kind of things. But actually in their research, they were very surprised to find that people cited the smaller things on a regular basis as the things that kind of depleted our resilience levels and sort of made us not being able to cope with pressure and stress. And these were things like negative feedback, toxic relationships, either in work or outside of work, and just an overload, you know, so the email overload, just too many demands, too many pressures, not the big stuff, but just the cumulative effect of lots and lots of little things. So the key thing is really to think about how we respond to pressure and stress, and what are your resources that you can do to cope with it, to build up your resilience levels. And I'm just going to show you this slide here about building resilience. So there's lots of things that we can have in place to help us build up our resilience levels, to help us deal better with pressures and stresses on a daily basis. One of those at the top there is trying to develop a positive mindset to help us deal with the stuff, trying to look for the positive in things. And this can easily be done to sort of to flex your mind. You know, our minds are sort of neuroplastic. You know, we can build new habits, new mindsets in it. It's trying to sort of focus on 3 good things every single day. And I know that sounds a little bit airy-fairy. It's something which I've shared with my clients, and I was, a bit reticent to for a long time. But the feedback from people has been absolutely amazing. They've said, actually, just training your mind to focus on the positive. We're so quick at dismissing or discounting the good stuff that happens, the positive feedback. We have this negative bias as humans. Again, it's our safety mechanism to keep us safe, but actually focusing on some of the positives can make a world of difference. Focusing on what you can control, where is your energy being placed? Are you really focusing time, attention, energies on things that you can control, things that you can influence, or is too much being spent on the stuff which is just out of our control and we've got no influence over? Visualization, so sort of looking to the future, this can be sort of daydreaming, planning, stuff like this, but actually sort of trying to formulate a plan and a vision in your mind can help. Anxiety control is really important to sort of deal with the stress hormones, the sort of the excess sort of energies that you might have. So sort of dealing with anxieties, thought patterns, negative thinking errors and stuff like that is hugely important. And relaxation techniques as well. So being able to switch off, to relax, to recharge, to recuperate. And again, thinking about the parity with physical health and athletes, any sort of athletes or sports person values their rest days as much as their training days. They need their physical health to recharge and recuperate and mend. We need to do exactly the same with our mental health. We only have so much mental energy. We can't keep going on infinitely. We have to sort of stop, have boundaries, take time out and do something else. And as humans, tracking success is really vital for us. We're so quick to go from A to B to C to D that we forget sometimes to pause and to look back and think, well, where have I come from? Notice, how much you've learned, developed and grown. There's also some great work by positive psychologists. This is by Martin Seligman, who looks at resilience. And in terms of building a resilient mindset to deal with stuff, he talks about the 3 Ps that can help build up our resilience. So those are not taking things personally. We don't need to be personally responsible for everything. It's not always our fault. Things aren't permanent, so, again, thinking about the coronavirus at the moment, it's worth really remembering, this isn't going to be like this forever. Things are going to change. We're not going to be in lockdown situation permanently. And also things aren't pervasive, so just because things are, difficult in one part of our lives doesn't mean that everything in all of the other parts of our lives need to be affected as well. So quite often when we're in a sort of negative stress state, everything can seem bad and overwhelming. If we're not very good at one particular aspect of our job, it doesn't mean to say that there's other aspects of our job or our life that we're not good at. We can be great in other things as well. And some of the ways of building up resilience can be to gain perspective, trying to get a new perspective on the situation. And, I accept that this can be really difficult when you're in the thick of things, trying to get that sort of perspective. So this is where sometimes having a chat with someone else can give you a different insight into things. But if you're dealing with stuff, just have a think for a moment on a scale of 1 to 100. How really stressful or important is this situation right now? If 1 is kind of, absolutely doesn't matter, doesn't make any difference, and 100 is absolutely sort of, awful, life-changing stuff that you have to deal with straight away, get a bit of perspective on a scale. Or think of the situation and how much it will matter in, X number of days, weeks, months' time. This can really help in terms of the resilience and sort of, not getting that sort of a permanent stuck state that isn't helpful for us to be in. Sometimes people think, would they gamble their own situation for another one in the world? So if everyone put in their own stresses into a circle and they had to take something else back without knowing what it might be, how difficult is this to be in sort of comparison to perhaps other people? Sometimes, the stuff that we've got going on, we take for granted until we actually sort of think about others around us. And the final one there on the screen, which is one which I absolutely love, this is actually from Cher when she was doing some promotion for the Mamma Mia 2 film that came out a year or so ago. And I think it was Graham Norton asked her the question, how does she, how has she sort of coped with having such a long career in show business? And she said her mantra is that if it doesn't matter in 5 years' time, it doesn't matter. Which I think is just absolutely fantastic. For me, this is probably like one of the ones that works the best. If you're getting really stressed about something, just pausing to think, actually, what, is this really going to matter that much in 5 years' time? And it can just help, just giving a little bit of perspective to deal with it. And coming back to the control thing, so thinking about, your situation, what you're dealing with, have a look at it in terms of this control and influence circle. Is it something that you can do, that you can deal with, that's in your control? Is there something to do with the situation that you can influence, even if it's not directly within your control? Or is it something that is totally out of your control that you can't do anything about at all? So just sort of, try and think, whereabouts, are you directing your energies? Are you using your mental energies in the best possible way? And this is it for this short session. So thinking about sort of pressure and stress. So I hope that's been helpful for you. Please drop me a line by Twitter, LinkedIn, contact details are there as well. If there's any sort of further questions, any comments, I would love to find out from you and hear your thoughts. Any top tips that you want to share as well will be also great to hear as well. I don't have all the answers. Other people can also share other stuff that they find that works for them in dealing with pressure and stress as well. So please let me know and share your ideas and be in touch. And thank you so much for listening to this. I really hope it's been helpful for you. Please be in touch. Let me know how you're getting on. Best of luck with handling pressure and stress. It's not going to go away, but there's loads of things, resources that you can do to build up your resilience to deal with it. So yeah, take care. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
To meet the needs of everyone.
To be free at the point of delivery.
To be accessed on need and not wealth.
When it comes to maximising both yours and your team's productivity, there is no one better placed to help than Emma Mills-Sheffield. Listed by F Entrepreneur as one of the top 100 female entrepreneurs in the UK, Emma coaches businesses and employees to reach their goals and increase productivity and performance. Given the current circumstances we find ourselves in, we all need to be listening to Emma.
Hi everyone, welcome to my talk on how to help your remote teams with productivity and connection. Thank you to everyone at Silicon Brighton Online for the NHS fundraiser. It's a fantastic day of talks and there's lots to learn. Hopefully there'll be some networking, lots of Q&A and an opportunity to kind of support the NHS and everyone in the community that's really helping at this time. I'm not going to use the words unprecedented or uncharted. I might use challenging, but I'm just going to call everything weird, okay? Everything is weird right now. So we're not together in person. We're doing everything online, which is, it's okay, but it's not the same. And we really have quite a few challenges at the moment. Oh, you said challenges, didn't I? Okay, right, one. Chalk up one on the bingo card for challenges. So, it's a weird time. We're working differently. We have to keep business going. We have to support our employees. We have to look after ourselves, our mental well-being, and also that of our families. And it's a lot to do. And so I'm going to take you through this talk on my top tips on how to stay productive and how to help your employees and anyone in your teams to stay connected and to, I guess, get everything done. I'm not a work productivity geek. That's not my thing. For me, it's about having a holistic view of what everybody has to do so we can work smarter with what we have. Basically, get things done. Go out and have that walk that we're allowed to have each day and just clear your head. So let's crack on. One of my other sayings, I like to crack on and I like to get shit done. So that's something that you're going to hear a lot from me in the next sort of 10 minutes or so. So why do I bang on about productivity all the time? I get asked that a lot actually. So be it from clients, be it from family, especially at home. I do like to plan things. I'm a bit of a moniker from friends and I don't apologise for that. I think it's fine. I still have one of those cupboards at the end of the hallway that no one's allowed into, and maybe that's an age reference that some people on the call won't understand, but it's fine. We'll go with it. The reason I talk about productivity is I have a fairly hefty project management background. I spent 15 years in industry, worked on major projects and pursuits, large programs in the UK, the US, different global teams. I was at KPMG, I was in engineering, creative and digital industries in Brighton as well. I've worked across public sector, charities, FTSE 100, Fortune 500, and there's no sector that I haven't actually worked alongside or been involved in, apart from nuclear, but that's fine. We don't need to go there. I'm not interested in that one. I keep busy. So as well as running a business, I'm also a business and student mentor at the Innovation Centre and for the University of Sussex. I'm the chair of a board for Grassroots Suicide Prevention, Brighton-based charity, and also volunteer for Re-Engage. And this year was one of 100 female entrepreneurs as part of the Small Business Campaign for 2020 in the UK. So I do quite a bit, and that's why I love productivity. So my ethos is life is short, so I help businesses get shit done. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about, and how you can help your teams as well. So 10 top tips on productivity. There are squillions out there. Go onto any website and you'll see the sort of hits of productivity are rising. We've got two ends of the spectrum. One which is, if you don't come out of this crisis with a new skill, then you're failing. Sorry, that's not okay. The other side is actually, if you're just up and dressed today, then you're winning. And I think there's absolutely a spectrum here. And what's really, really important is that we all understand that as business leaders, but we also have to understand it for our employees as well. Everybody's going through a really different time right now. So as we kind of went into the way we work now, there was a bit of a crisis point and a bit of a buzz around how we're going to get working remotely. And this is different for some people. It's very, very new for others. And for some people, working from home is actually part and parcel of what they do. But we have days and weeks where things change. And I think you'll probably all have experienced those ups and downs. They come quite quickly. And so it's really hard to work with a team when we don't all have the same kind of cadence. So thinking about working with your energy levels, so not against them. Think about when you're going to be most productive, and that applies to you and your teams. Potentially it's in the mornings, so thinking about how to block out time, which we'll cover shortly, to really get done what you have to get done. So thinking along the lines of doing the most strategic stuff first, then blocking out time to do the sort of day job, and then having admin time separately. Which is why on the left here we've got reducing distractions. So just unplugging can help your focus. Some people like to use Forest. It's a good app that just keeps everything locked out whilst you're working. So that can give you those times to kind of get your head down. We think about giving yourself a strategic task a day as well. So what is the one thing that you can do that really has an impact on your job or your business? Once you've conquered that, everything else starts to fall into place. And if you don't get everything else done, that's also okay. Thinking along with the meetings, the video calls, the Zooms, the Microsoft Teams, the Google Hangouts, the endless connectivity methods that we have, there's a lot to do, and there's a lot of different ways of staying connected. And I'd say absolutely stay regularly connected with your teams. If it's daily, it's twice a week, and make sure everyone's on a sort of an all-hands call, or maybe have one-to-ones. Understand that everybody's different, and everybody has something else going on at home at the moment. So keep your meetings and video calls to the point. Don't include everyone and their dog, although dog will walk in at some point, I'm sure. Try and keep it appropriate. People are zoomed out, and I'm sure that'll hit the dictionary next year as one of the new words. But people are exhausted. So actually being on a video constantly is much more tiring than being face-to-face. We can't read the physical cues that we normally would, and you absolutely have to focus. It's very hard to zone out. And I think there's also an expectation that because you're not going anywhere, you must be available. In which case, why can't you just log on to another call? But if you're not careful, they will rack up. And as a business leader, you will be impacted, and your employees will be. So just think about how to keep things tidy, really. Also look at having a buddy or a backup plan for sharing workload. So if you have to work flexibly, in fact, you will be working flexibly. And this is the one opportunity I think that's really going to help shape businesses and how we work and how we expect employees to show up. Because you're working flexibly, just consider how people have to cut their days up now. So we're homeschooling, we have fairly independent teenagers, we have small children, we have other caregiving responsibilities, we have potentially somebody who's unwell at home. There's so much going on that it affects headspace and it affects our working day. So this is the opportunity, I think, to just tear up the rule book and say, okay, how does it work for you? So as an employee, what do you need? So potentially you're going to have some very, very staggered times throughout the day where people are working hard and people are saying, actually, I need to check out for a while. That has to be okay. It's how we all have to work now. So having a buddy is great for staying in touch and also having a backup. So if it's a case of, as Sheryl Sandberg would say about leaning in, but maybe it's a case that actually I need to step out for this one, and you just have that sort of role sharing options. Lastly, just think about the culture. So where you have agreed times to focus, times for admin and times for meetings. Potentially don't have your team meetings in the mornings if you can avoid it, because unless it really kickstarts your day or your week, having these video calls then gets tiring and it takes you away from being able to get your head down and focusing. So if everyone can just start the day by focusing on their main task, then you can catch up with people later in the day. And also our attention is much more limited now. So divide and conquer the big tasks. Share them out amongst the team or try and split them out throughout your day and your week so people aren't overwhelmed or overburdened. There's a lot of tips there. They're pragmatic. They are just crushingly sensible in order to help you get shit done. There's no fluff. There's nothing ethereal, and it's just good standard working practices. So a statistic I often talk to people in workshops about is this percentage of the working day that's actually productive. And it's about 30 to 40% typically. I think now it's probably less. And I don't advocate the do more with less approach and really, really pushing people, because you can't be there to help them as easily if there's a problem. It's not healthy to go and expect our employees to do the same. So actually being productive is not what we think it is. I love this graphic that really shows us, I think, what productivity actually is. It's not 100% hard work. There's a fair percentage of hard work, but there's also about being healthy, eating well, exercising, sleeping well, and taking time off. And productivity, I see as actually being present. So it's not just work, it's about being present in what you do and intentional. So if you're working, that's absolutely what you're doing. But if you're taking time off, the laptop lid is down, you're not checking in at 10 p.m. and you're resting. So just think about how you might structure your days, and also encourage your employees to do the same as well. So to become more productive, there's sort of 3 things I'd just like to cover off, and it's around cutting out busyness. Busy is a byword for how we operate now. Everybody has to be busy, 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 and it's not necessarily productive or healthy. So cutting out the extra stuff, the noise, the constant alerts, the social media, the different distractions really, really helps. Also understanding how to focus has a real impact on how we can get our jobs done. And think about culture and change in your business as well. So you might have to change as a team, as a business, to accommodate different working patterns, but it could be for the better. So do consider how you might change in the future, what you might have learned over this period as to what works and how other people might be supported best in the future. Now, I love a good exercise. So this is the productivity geek in me. So wherever you see a pencil in this talk, you know you can do this as an exercise on your own and with your teams. And I love this one, the circle of concern. So Stephen Covey exercise. In the middle is what we can control, very small normally. What we can influence is the next circle. And what's in our circle of concern is everything else. So I would start with a big piece of paper, do it on your own, do it with your family. Actually, it's great to get kids involved in this to really understand what's worrying them at the moment. And put it on Post-it notes, just put everything that's worrying you down on paper in this big circle of concern. And it could be anything. It could be finances, it could be coronavirus is probably going to show up. And put it all on there. And then take a real pragmatic view and say, look, what can I actually control? And once you understand what you can control, suddenly all the other worries kind of just sit outside. It helps to avoid overwhelm. It also helps people to take action. So it helps when you understand what you can control. It could be more than you think, or what you can influence could be more than you think. So in actual fact, you get much more clarity, and it helps you to just start to make progress in setting out what tasks you need to do. There's loads of research on this online, and it is a great exercise to do with families and with teams as well. So that way people start to take ownership on what they might be able to control and manage. We have also mind mapping. So another exercise you can do so easily. Mind map everything. So I'm sure you know what that is, but if not, you put your sort of topic in the middle, and then you have all the sort of spindles or spider legs coming off the outside. Write down everything that you have to do, and I mean everything. Even have one spoke for home stuff and finances and everything else for business. And once you've listed everything out, something you can help with avoiding procrastination is to put a letter S next to everything on there that's strategic. So does it align to the aims and directions of your business? Does it align to your goals? Or will you learn something from doing this? In which case, it's a big strategic task. I for important, so what is important versus urgent? Normally, urgent tasks are someone else's. Urgent or important, they're not yours. So think about what's important. Does it support a business goal? Does it serve your clients or your employees? In which case, put an I next to it. And E for effective. What are you great at doing? Are you better than someone else at this? And also, it doesn't take a disproportionate amount of time. So by working effectively, it means you can really focus on what you should be doing. And if everyone in your team does this, you get a much better plan of where people are at their best. If everyone focuses on just being brilliant at what they do well, then it makes it easier to sort of assign projects and different tasks. It's important if you've got people on furlough as well and you've got other roles being covered and there's a bit of overwhelm, or you might have other tasks needing to be done that not everyone understands how to do. So just doing this exercise to mind map and work out what is strategic, important and effective really helps with that clarity. And a to-do list. I do love a to-do list. So we've all got a long list. It might be on Trello, it could be on paper, it could be on the back of a fag packet. But an exercise I like people to work through is to just work out, top left, what do you need to do and want to do? Top right, what do you need to do and don't want to do? Bottom left, you don't need to do it, but you want to do it. I tend to put things like finding the best blog post picture in the world ends up on there, because in reality, it doesn't have an impact on our business, but we use it as a good distraction method. And then bottom right, somebody else is better at this. So that's how you delegate or you outsource. If someone else can do this better than you, this particular task, then have that conversation. This is how we delegate well. And it really helps doing this exercise on your own and then also with your team, so you can run it as a team on one of your team calls, is when you understand where you should be putting your time and your energy. And even on here, if you put the strategic, the S, you put the I for important, the E for effective, it helps you block out what you should be doing in those strategic time blocks in your diary, where you've got the most energy and you've got the most focus. And lastly, just look at your diary. Look at your days and step back, almost print it out and look at it on a page. You can run this exercise with your teams as well, so they can really get a sense of how to achieve what they need to do. Look at how you're going to take out everything it's a given. So you might have your team meeting on a Tuesday and you're having an online pub quiz on a Friday, which is a great way to stay connected with people. Agree on those strategic time blocks, even if this is an hour in the mornings or whatever works with your team. Get those blocks put in so they're sacred. That's when you're not going to be answering Slack messages or on Insta message or anything like that. Business, I've put business in, it's really what is critical to your role. So it could be, it's basically the day job for everybody. And then build in admin blocks. And if everyone has this sort of slight cultural shift where they understand that not everybody's going to answer an email instantly, that presenteeism isn't actually what's needed, then it's okay for people to respond to messages 3 times throughout the day. Put in half-an-hour blocks throughout the day. We don't need to be constantly on tap for everybody. And that's part of the reducing overwhelm point. It's too easy to get tied up in all of the stuff and the noise that happens. So just blocking out those times in the diary really helps people understand. And if you want to share this with your team on a calendar, brilliant. Then everybody knows. I mean, this is an ideal week, for instance, but it should help just reduce the noise, the distractions, and also overwhelm. My final tips on delegation. So just agree outcomes with people. It's really important now we're working remotely that people are super clear on their expectations and also that they understand how to ask for help. So be clear on the tasks or activities. agree the resources, making sure it's a realistic amount of work and the timescales are achievable. And if supervision or support is needed, who is there to help? Give constructive feedback. So it could be a good learning point, but make sure you're sensitive to the fact that you don't give someone a rollicking and expect to be able to put your arm around their shoulders, because working remotely, we have to be really careful with how we communicate. And also look at who's best suited for this task. So you might have to use different people working on different things at the moment just because of the availability. That's okay, but just consider who's best suited and do they have a choice in the task. If they have a choice, typically people will take more ownership and accountability and you'll get a better result. So that's a whistle-stop tour of productivity, on how to stay connected with your teams, keep them engaged. There's lots of exercises in there. Please do contact the organisers if you want any more information. I've got my contact details here, and I'm really, really happy to have a follow-up conversation or send out any templates or give you more guidance on the content that I've just gone through. So thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you to Silicon Brighton as well. Thank you.